I imagine the gavel striking, and I call the regular meeting of the Eugene School Board to order on Wednesday, April 19th, 2023 at 7 p.m. Board members attending tonight are Alicia Hayes, Gordon Lafer, Judy Newman, Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Michelle Shu, and myself, Maya Rabasa. Welcome to our very first hybrid meeting where the meeting is being chaired by somebody who is attending virtually. Please bear with me and extend a little grace. It's hard to hear on this end. The first item on our agenda is to join Superintendent Dye as he leads us in the flag salute.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now I will read the land acknowledgement. The Eugene School Board would like to acknowledge that our institution sits on the homelands of the Kalapuya people. In the treaties of 1851 and 1854 to 1855, and the subsequent forced removals of many Indian people from Western Oregon, some of the Kalapuya were moved to the Grand Ronde Reservation and some were moved to the Siletz Reservation. It is important to note that all of Lane County was and continues to be an important trading and gathering area for camas and other resources. During the Restoration era from 1977 to 1989, Lane County was designated as the service area for the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua and Sayusla Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, the Coquel Indian Tribe, and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians. Eugene School District 4J acknowledges that the descendants of original and service area inhabitants of this land are still here today. They are thriving members of our schools and our communities. Countless members of other tribes now also call our community and schools their home. We wish to thank those original stewards of this land. We, as fellow stewards of this land, wish to remember that we need to take good care of this land and take good care of all the members of our school district community. First up on our agenda is to receive reports from high school student representatives. If y'all could wave your arms so I can see you on the screen, that would be super helpful. Awesome. Chaz, would you like to go first? Great. Thank you.
I am Sheldon, high school student representative. The Avidize conference between the Avid classes in 4J will be this Thursday to honor seniors and help build Avid's community in our district. Sheldon is hosting an assembly this Thursday with various activities and topics covered. At this assembly, our No Place for Hate program will lead our student body through their pledge. We will also honor our colleagues in Winter Guard for winning state competitions, as well as our varsity choir and wind ensemble for qualifying. We are also very excited to host a preview of our Adams Family musical during the assembly. This is one of two previews, with the other being held at Holt Elementary School this Friday. The Adams Family musical will have opening night on April 28th, starting at 7 p.m. We have evening shows on the 28th, 29th, 5th, and 6th, as well as a matinee at 2 on the 30th. Both our matinee show and closing night on the 6th will have ASL interpreters. Tonight, Sheldon is trying to welcome our incoming freshman class with the first of many events held at our high school. Later this week, Sheldon's 10 and leadership students will be participating in a friendly basketball game with Churchill. We are prepping our students for next year by beginning our forecasting process and holding graduation prep advisories for our seniors. Our science teacher brought in University of Oregon's Professor Dr. Alomon to share information about his research in science at higher levels. I attended this presentation myself and it was really fun and very interesting. Our gardening club has been revamping our science courtyard with growing planters and is creating a native plant garden to teach about Oregon's nature. Our Asian Pacific Islander Student Union had a successful kickoff with a lei making workshop. APISU is planning to continue these throughout the year. Sheldon's Asian Student Union is planning on attending the Asian Pacific Leadership Youth Conference, and Sheldon's Black Student Union has a field trip planned to see a statue. Finally, we are reviewing and reinforcing our Acknowledge Care Tell suicide prevention initiative with multiple activities over the next 2 months, including direct reteach in second period classes this Wednesday.
Thank you, Chaz. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next. Hi
Thank you,
everyone,
Beth.
it's Josephine Smile, and I am a representative from Churchill High School. Today I'll be talking about some events that are happening. Today, the Black City Meeting went on their field trip to OSU. I attended as well, it was really fun. Tomorrow, there's going to be Agonize, as you said earlier, and I'll be attending that as well. And our juniors, Avid juniors have started their class or scheduling for next year. Our Lancer pageant, which is a event that's going to happen this Friday, which is very exciting for everyone. And our promise this weekend, yeah, and we're all excited to go and attend and have fun.
Thank you, Bata Fing. Parker?
Hi, I'm Parker Anderson, and I'm the student representative for North Eugene High School. Since we went from spring break, we've been getting addition to a third trimester schedule. We've also started scheduling for our classes for next year. And that's been running pretty smoothly. There have been a few issues so far with the technology, but nothing that isn't underway of being fixed. The biggest thing being that there has been a little anxiety among students about the new ABC day schedule that's been talked about for next year and how that would work concerning having something just like having such short classes on Mondays or having all 8 classes in one day. How that would look like having potentially almost different schedules every day with class periods or class lengths changing from having 8 classes in one day, to having advisories another day, to having a short period on Wednesday, to then going to a normal AB schedule. And it absolutely makes sense that the board has made that decision with the students, teachers, and staff in mind, but still potentially a little more communication about like what that's all going to work like and like what went into making that decision. I think would be helpful for some of the students because it's not at all something that isn't possible to work with, but potentially a little more like of that communication to ease the anxiety of like having such a big change. I think it's something that would be very much appreciated by many students. We have prom coming up in the next few weeks, which students are all very excited about, as tickets went on sale this week. And North Eugene is also doing a production of Adam Sandler the musical coming up, which will be running from May 4th to 6th, and then on May 11th to the 13th. And we're all very excited for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Parker. Unless there's someone whose screen is not on, it looks like you're the 3 in attendance tonight. Is that correct? Yeah.
I think Brandon Washington is in attendance but wasn't gonna make comments, just so we're having a little trouble with the link, but she's out there.
Okay.
She
Yeah.
didn't want to make any comments, I just wanted you to know she was here.
Okay, thank you, JD. Yeah, while you say that, I've received a few messages from folks wondering if the link on the calendar is correct. So just for those who can change that, to note that. Chaz, you have your hand up?
I just wanted to reinforce Parker's statement about students needing communication about the changes to the schedule next year. There is still a lot of unknowns and anxieties about, and we need communication in order to help students and teachers understand why the change came, the process that was behind it, and how it's going to help them in the future.
Thank you, Chaz. Okay, well, thank you to the 3 of you and to all our student board reps, whether they spoke tonight or not, but we appreciate hearing from you and learning about what is happening and what you're wondering and hopes are for us. And so thank you all. Next up on the agenda is an agenda review. Are there any questions, changes, or corrections to the agenda anyone would like to request? Gordon?
I'd like to add, I propose that we add 3 items for action during that part of the meeting to decide how we want to handle the 3 complaints that were heard in the work session earlier tonight.
Barring any objections, we will add those. Does anybody object? Wave your arms, speak up. I know this is tricky to have me gone. All right, I don't see any objections to adding 3 items, so we will add 3 items for action regarding the complaints we just discussed in our work session. Are there any other questions, changes, or corrections to the agenda anybody would like to bring up? Okay, great. Apart from those 3 items, then the agenda stands. Next up on the agenda is an introduction of guests and the superintendent's report. Superintendent Dye, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, in the middle of Volunteer Appreciation Month, I reflected on my gratitude for the advocacy and involvement of many community members, much like those in attendance this evening and listening on the radio. Some have reached out to engage with the district and share support of important programming, needs of individual students, recommendations on budget items, facilities concerns, or input on district decisions, including our high school schedule. Very much appreciated. This engagement demonstrates the value our community places on the work we do. Our community has very high aspirations for their schools and their students, and we share high expectations for successful student outcomes. The decisions this district makes have tangible and important impacts on the experiences of our students, and I'm thankful for a community that vocalizes its preferences. We're a community with a rich history of advocacy and involvement. Though that can, and often does, result in challenging conversations, it is within these discussions that important questions surface that ensure, even when we disagree, we are well informed in our decision-making process. As we continue through the spring season, this board and district leaders will be presented with many key decisions that will lay the groundwork for the success of our students. It is not lost upon anyone that there are at least 2 sides to every decision. We're in the business of growing and tending to individuals, not one in which we can increase our output to increase profit margins. For that reason, we must be thoughtful in understanding the allocations of those finite resources that we have, whether it is in staffing, physical outlay, or time. Where we spend in one area, however, must be balanced in others. Later this evening, the board will be faced with challenging conversations in which important and valid competing priorities will have to be evaluated and weighed against the needs across the entire system. Earlier this week, the Budget Committee convened to continue the process of key resource distribution. Their recommendations to this board will inevitably have pros and cons. As an organization, we are fortunate that we've had strong fiscal policy and decision-making in the past that has afforded the reserves to continue to sustain the services that we have for the past several years moving into the future. Other districts across the state are less fortunate. However, we know it isn't sustainable indefinitely. The Budget Committee, the board, and district leaders will have to evaluate our organization and look towards a future that is sustainable and supports our core function of teaching and learning. This sustainable future must be built to withstand economic and enrollment uncertainties while still offering high-quality educational opportunities for our students and position us to deliver on our promises for decades to come. Once again, we know that doesn't come without trade-offs and are very appreciative of those who provide valuable insight to inform quality decision-making practices. I know it's not easy, but I very much appreciate everybody's involvement. With that, I'll turn it back over to the board and look forward to hearing further from our committee.
Thank you, Superintendent Dye. Next up on our agenda is items raised by the audience. The school board receives written comments by email at board@4j.lane.edu and sets aside time in each regular board meeting to hear public comment. Community members can sign up to speak to the board by submitting their request online at 4j.lane.edu/board/public comment or contacting the superintendent's office. The deadline is the Monday before each meeting. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes and cannot give their time to another speaker. A timer will count up, indicating when the speaker's time is up. Speakers may offer objective comments or criticism about district operations and programs. For complaints about individuals, including district staff or board members, the district has a board policy and complaint process. Please contact the superintendent's office at 541-790-7707 for more information about submitting a formal complaint. Please extend the same courtesy to members of the community. I believe we have 10 speakers signed up to speak tonight, and I will pass it off to Debbie to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Chair Rabassa. Our first speaker tonight was going to be Amanda Havas, that Amanda has traded with Harry Sayer. So is Harry here?
No, technically we ask that people don't trade their time, but I think that technically what we ask is that they don't give their time to another. I'm reading back. Cannot give their time to another speaker.
Okay.
So.
No, I'll keep it, and I can explain.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I appreciate seeing you there. That is very helpful. We don't have to split hairs here.
Yeah, okay, hold on a second.
You can always bring somebody up with you, Amanda.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Thank you, you guys are all so helpful. Okay. I got an email today at noon saying, you got accepted, and last month I didn't, and I said, if there's room next time, I will. And I forgot that I said that. So it's a surprise, so I've been thinking of what I'm gonna say. And I'll start my 3-minute timer right here, and I'll tell you my whole life story. Okay, got my 3 minutes. I'd love to acknowledge that it's Autism Awareness Month and just celebrate all that we are doing right here. I have a friend who is just turned 40 and she was diagnosed with autism in the last year. And it took her forever to get diagnosed with that because it's very sometimes difficult to diagnose and oftentimes, especially women. So what I did want to say is that I really feel like we're doing some things very well currently in our school district, in our country, in our state. We're far beyond where we used to be 20 years ago in education, so I just do want to acknowledge that. Let's see what else. My dad, along this line of gratitude, my dad, when my son Ollie was born, he has special needs, and it was, life or death for a while and all these hard things. He said, I'm just so glad that he was born in America. And my dad travels a lot to different countries that have a lot of different perspectives on how to handle special needs or disabilities and stuff like that. And so in the countries that he's been going to, my child would just be on the streets. And so again, I think we're doing a really good job in some ways here that we can celebrate, even though we're talking about lots of difficult and hard things. Continuing on with special ed education in mind, as you guys are trying to figure out what it's going to look like in the next school year, I know there's lots of budget things coming up and a lot of decisions to be made on how to do things. I would really propose that you use your hearts and your minds, sometimes even more than like all of the fancy words that are coming out a lot right now. Like, I feel like we could argue over a lot of words and what they mean and how they go. For one, the term equity. Ollie, he only was allowed to go to school for 4 days out of the week during a lot of the lockdown and the COVID situation. It was because there weren't enough EAs to be in his classroom. I spoke about this back then. And I was begging everybody, like, can you just open up any of the life skills classes that do have the staff to be there, because I understand there's equity at stake and not everybody can be there, and so it's not fair, but like honestly, some people need to go to work. So what I'm saying for the heart and the mind thing is like, I know that we have to go by systems and rules and it's good. But in any moment where it's a very crucial moment, I would ask that you would use like the humanity and like those parts of you where you can think through a situation and be more creative and think with your community members in order to problem solve. Because I would have given up my, always thought like we would have done school at home to support other people being in the classroom that needed to go to work or that didn't have the resources at home to really support their kids. So as you're thinking about all these things, I would just really encourage a lot of community participation and listening to community members. And even stuff like when I get done with this, being like, hey, that, interesting thought, Amanda, versus just silence, which I know is part of the rule, but like, I think that should change.
On that
Thank
note,
you for what you do.
thank you so much. Interesting thoughts. We appreciate it.
I know you vice chair, so can I get a point of personal privilege? As in, can we get chairs for the people? I'm just big on chairs. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I'm done.
Thank you, Alicia. Does that mean there's people that are back there standing up? Okay.
Yes, and Angela Zimmerman would like to get ready to speak. She will be the next speaker.
I also ask you to turn the, I'm getting notes that they can't see the speaker. And can you can see yourself if you flip it up a little. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angela Finner. My pronouns are she, her, and I teach high school social studies at Eugene Online Academy. On the day after the 4J Neurodiversity Fair, staff at EOA were notified that we would be cut 5 FTE, which is a third of our program. The timing was ironic because 45% of our students at the secondary level have a 504 or an IEP, and the majority of those are for supports for neurodivergence. I have the impression that not very many people outside of EOA have much familiarity with what we do. So tonight I want to share a few things that I think are important for you to be aware of. First and foremost, we provide a safe learning environment for students that don't find safety in the brick and mortar experience. During the pandemic, COVID was the primary safety concern that drove students to us, but this year, it has become clear that we now serve students that are in crisis with their mental health, disabilities, family, and housing. We are the only school choice alt-ed and the only alt-ed option for middle schoolers. Students choose us because of our flexible learning model, gives students the ability to naturally circumnavigate the systemic barriers that prevent a fair, appropriate, and least restrictive environment. We have a chance to build a safe space and a positive connection, and students need this first and foremost, as you've heard from your student reps say time and time again. Not only does our program support the educational learning needs of students fully online, but we're increasingly becoming an option for students wanting hybrid and credit recovery. The content that we teach is from FUEL-Ed, which no one likes. It's stressful to navigate for students and expensive for the district. I could talk a lot about this for a while, but the important information that you know is that everyone would benefit from having that money allocated towards 4J teachers and TOSAs to create Canvas courses that align with the rest of the district. Canvas construction is not just a preference, but our legal responsibility. There is no camp curriculum that you can purchase that will be compliant with Senate Bill 13 and other laws. And I personally believe that diverse representation in our curriculum is violence and suicide prevention. I teach economics and my partner is an accountant, so I understand the difficult choices that need to be made in a budget. We have a limited amount of resources and everyone has a need. But something else that I know is that numbers represent people. For the people at EOA, this is a devastating cut to an essential program. I thank you for listening, but I want to end on a personal note. I myself am neurodivergent. Since leaving the brick and mortar environment, I've been publicly recognized for my excellence and value 2 of my 3 years teaching online, and I never was in person.
Nothing about me has changed except the environment I'm in. I've always had this value, just no one saw it so vividly without my disability getting in the way. I think my students feel the same way about themselves. Please help my students continue to be in the environment that they thrive in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bitterin. Our next speaker is Chelsea Hardrath.
Konbanwa, watashi no namae wa Cherishi Hardrath desu. Hello, my name is Chelsea Hardrath, and I am a parent of a junior at North Eugene High School and a 7th grade student at Kelly Middle School. Tonight, you'll be voting to close a chapter in North's history. As a graduate of North Eugene High School, it is bittersweet to hear that the building is in such disrepair that it would take around $30 million to remedy all the deferred maintenance. Ironically, that is the approximate cost that buildings such as YG Corridor would cost to replace. The building at 250 Silverly Lane, potentially the old, particularly there, Old North Eugene. So the burden is on my heart. I have had numerous meetings over the years, listening, learning, questioning, and now grieving the loss of both of these buildings. I find myself questioning why. Why does this all hurt so bad? As I boil it down, I came to the realization, and I apologize if I cry, home is where the heart is. As a graduate of North Eugene High School, I walked my senior year over to a classroom at Corridor Elementary School. I volunteered in the classroom where there was 2 Japanese courses, one in English, one in Japanese. Little did I know, approximately 20 years later, my kids would be walking down the hall of Kelly Middle School, volunteering their time in the Japanese immersion program. Schools are not just buildings, they are homes. They are places where we spend the majority of our lives. They are places where our identities are developed and grown. Moreover, they are places where friendships are established. Many of those friendships for me are parents, staff that are sitting back behind me. We celebrate schools when they're open, but what do we do when we lose them, or when they are closed, or when they are lost? Personally, the Old North is an ideal place for housing a middle school program, a program like Kelly Middle School. Old North has a culinary, wood shop, and the ability for growth, things that are needed right now at Kelly Middle School, but they're unable to do that. Kids, if they were to go to Kelly Middle School at the Old North building, would have the ability to walk to the New North for advanced math. Currently, I got an email yesterday saying if you take advanced math, you will take it online. There won't be a course for you to do so. Thus, I have these requests, knowing that tonight, this decision will be made to demolish Old North. There will be a commitment for YG program at the North Eugene region. Sending North to the South region is not acceptable. If the district wants to uphold its belief in diversity, equity, and inclusion, suggesting the move of a program that has the second highest minority enrollment to an elementary school in the district is not a lie. Additionally, YG also reflects in their staff racial diversity that it has in its students. 60% of the students at YG are from the North Eugene region. Make YG a neighborhood school, like River Road Elementary School. It's a neighborhood school and families are given the opportunity to opt in. Thank you, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hardrath. Our next speaker tonight is Jennifer Goodlett.
Hey, so I'm an ELD teacher at YG. I want to remind those listening to this of the common saying, poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. Yet this is in fact what is happening to both the schools at the 850 Howard site. The district decided to demolish the Silverleaf site that housed YG and squeeze us into the 850 Howard site with Kelly, despite the fact that the staff at both schools did not think that it would give either school enough room, that it would require that we eliminate or handicap aspects of our programs, and would ultimately prevent both schools from any future growth. Now the board is deciding what to do with the Old North Eugene High School site. While a survey went out in a district newsletter, the district has not done its due diligence to survey the families in the North region, whom this will most directly impact. The district's info heavily placed the focus on the financial benefit of destroying Old North Eugene High School and emphasizing how this would make it equitable for the new North Eugene High School to have 2 turf soccer fields, so it would be more comparable to the green space of the other 4J high schools. Equity of green space is important and no one wants to deny any students this. But even student athletes are students first and athletes second. What about equity of educational space for everyday use at the 850 Howard site so that learning can happen? The information that the district did send out with the survey did not even mention that destroying the old North building would mean that YG would have to be permanently housed with Kelly Middle School in a building that is too small and older than the old North Eugene High School building it wants to demolish. Nor did it mention that they want to move YG completely across town to another site that was not built to last long term. Nor was the inequity of moving a program across town from the lower socioeconomic minority region to the more affluent white area brought up in the district's information with the survey. This needs to be considered, especially with only 5% of YG families in the South area and the majority of our families stating that they will not be able to attend YG if it is moved to Willard. Only 2 members of the board have attended the numerous meetings Kelly and YG have been having to solve the current issue of space between the 2 schools. Before the board votes on this huge decision, I would like 3 things. I invite the whole board to tour the 850 Howard site with representatives from both YG and Kelly during the school day to see what the reality of the situation is and understand what both schools have lost and are attempting to make work as a result of this co-location. Number 2, I would also like the district to work with both schools and North Eugene High School staff to create a survey to formally gather input from all the families with students attending schools in the North region whom this affects, so that the board can hear their voices and ideas before making this monumental decision. 3, at the very least, I am begging the board to temporarily table the vote until they have more information and a better understanding of the larger picture of what demolishing the old North Eugene High School building means for the rest of the North community.
Kelly DeAndrea will be our next speaker tonight. Is Kelly here? Okay, we will go to the next speaker, who is Kelly Stroh.
Any good speech should have evidence. So I teach my 5th graders. This is Tayo Murakami. He is one of our 5th graders teaching Gakuen. So he's just giving you a little bit of information. If you collected yourself. I'm Kelly Stroh. I'm a parent and a teacher at Eugene Gakuen. I want to start by telling you a little history of Eugene Gakuen. Thanks, Tayo. It was started 33 years ago and was the first ever Japanese immersion school in the United States. It was housed with corridor in this Silverleaf building. It was a beautiful building with murals and giant flower and cherry trees, which the children had picnics under every spring. It wasn't perfect, but it was home, and the children and staff all worked together to create a welcoming and inclusive community. Back in 2017, the school district representatives came to talk to the Eugene community. They informed the YG families and staff that they were running for bond. If the bond passed, they would be rebuilding the new North Eugene High School on the site that Eugene currently sits. We fought. We went to every board meeting in Mass and told why this was a terrible idea. Kelly Middle School was already in the building. They wouldn't fit in just one side. The school district told us their enrollment was very low. We argued that North Eugene had tons of housing growth in the area and would bring more families and more students. They told us they looked at the predicted numbers and no big growth was occurring. The middle school is continuing to grow. Middle schools wouldn't miss the space, they said. We fought. We were told this would be temporary, only 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years would give enough time to build the new high school building. Once the new building was built, either Kelly Middle School or Eugene could move into the old North Eugene building. We fought. We fought about every part of what they said, and we were told it would all work out, just trust us. Ultimately, we want to stay in the north end. We want our own space. We aren't picky on where we are or what that space is, but over 60% of our families are from the north region of town. We had a home. We were made unhoused by the district. We were placed in a temporary housing situation with promise of a new home, only to be told we may no longer have a home where our families and people live. YG has the highest minority enrollment of any, second highest of any in Eugene. You guys talk about diversity and equity. This is a diversity and equity issue. We look at the 2018 deferred maintenance, you'll find that in there, needs from the facility's long-range maintenance plan. If you look at the chart on page 59, it states Churchill would cost $15.4 million of deferred maintenance, South Eugene $17.4 million, Sheldon $19.4 million, and lastly North Eugene at only $13.2 million. Then why is the North Eugene building the only one that's being shut down and told it can't be occupied? Why was it acceptable for Corridor to move in there, and where did we get the 34,000 or 34 million? What's the point of all this? We want transparency from the district. We've had nothing but empty promises, and this has created tension between two communities, Kelly and YG, used to work together. You've displaced us, and we want to know why you can find money for a bid for eWeb, but not for students. We want a comprehensive list of all, you guys said it's code violations, we want the comprehensive list of all the code violations before you choose to demolish the school. So we just want transparency. It's not happening with us. Thank you.
L'Oreal Reyes is our next speaker today.
Good evening. My name is Mario Reyes. I am the father of a YG student and also a Kelly Middle School student. Over the past few years, as we've worked through the co-location of the two schools, we've seen a lot of hard work, some level of frustration, some wins, and some level of emotion. And a lot of that emotion comes from the fact that we're fighting for our kids, we're fighting for our students, and I think you can understand that. But one of the pieces of emotion that I've observed that's out there is because it feels like we are working against the board or against the administration while we're advocating for our kids. And so what I'm asking for you tonight is to please be an advocate for our students. Work with us as we find a good solution for the kids, for the school, for the community. Now I understand you're going to be working towards making an important decision tonight regarding the state of the North Eugene High School. And as I saw on the local newspaper, Jen McCulley, your communications director, created a poll to get public information regarding that. So I took a look at that poll today at 3 p.m. There's about 2,629 ratings and 112 different ideas and thoughts to input. So with that poll, you're getting a much broader range of public input than you're hearing from us here tonight. And I'll summarize that. The number one top rated item on there, the statement on there is, please consider the growing deficit in classroom space for North Eugene students and compare to that in other areas of town. YG and Kelly need space. A lack of space is decreasing interest in the YG program and hindering both schools. It will force the end of the immersion program long term. There's many more responses like that, but for the sake of time, I'll summarize. Every one of the top 32 rated responses referencing addressing the YG Kelly situation and utilizing the North Eugene building for students and solving that problem, not tearing that building down. For equity and for the North Eugene community. The lowest, the bottom ranked answers on there refer to demolishing the building and turning it into field space or other use. So again, 2,629 ratings. It's very compelling data. And with that, here are my 2 pieces of input for consideration. 1, use public data as your input as you work towards that decision. Please don't contribute to the perception that you look for input from public data and then decide to go do something different. Number 2, please fight for us, for the kids in the North Eugene region, in YG and Kelly. Don't move our local immersion school to another area of the city that gives higher income families better access to it, and putting the North Eugene students at a disadvantage. Fight for the equity of the region. And for YG's sake, please don't enable a decision that gives that school's hallway away. That would be crippling the YG school. Enabling that decision would be enabling the crippling of that school. Thank you.
Our next speaker tonight is Michael Jacob Bretland.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Michael Bratland. I'm a father of 5, 2 of which still go to Sheldon High School. I'm a foster parent of 2 amazing children. I'm a husband of a public school teacher and a graduate of Churchill High School. I'm here because I'm a concerned parent. I'm worried that with all the school shootings around the country, 4J is unprepared because we no longer have school resource officers at our schools. As a parent, we have a right to demand that our children are protected while at school. Some of you on the board were part of removing resource officers from 4J schools. Let's not wait for something horrible to happen before we act. It's time to realize that a mistake was made and that we should fix it. Let's bring back resource officers to our schools immediately. I also want to remind you that you were voted in by parents and community members to represent our wishes. You cannot ignore us. You cannot ignore us when we demand to see and understand what our kids are being taught in the classroom. Our children do not belong to you, the government, nor anyone else. They are our responsibility. And last, we expect our school board to act professional and work together in harmony instead of what we see every month. Constant bickering, name calling, and lack of focus. It's embarrassing and it needs to stop. Focus on education, period. Think about what your lack of cohesiveness is teaching our kids. As a school board, it is your responsibility to ensure that the concerns of parents are not only heard, but promptly acted upon. There's little evidence that you actually ever listen to parents, and it's time that you start. We heard tonight from students about lack of communication on new schedules, and from parents about lack of communication on the old school, North Eugene High School. And this needs to stop. So I'm asking you, as a concerned parent, push your personal agendas aside and start listening to parents. If you did just that, our school district would be an amazing place for all of us, especially our kids. It's time to focus on education and getting those math and reading scores up, and our kids feeling successful again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bratland. Our next speaker is Sarah Bier Reed. followed by Sophia Nance.
Good evening, members of the board, 4J families and staff, and all of the YG supporters behind me, especially. My name is Sarah Baird Reed, and I am the proud mother of two Eugene Gockman Elementary School students, Harper, a fourth grader, and Penelope, a kindergartner, as well as an English and writing educator with over 13 years of teaching experience, now serving the amazing students in community at Sheldon High School for the last 2. 4 years ago, we as parents sat on the benches in the YG corridor lunchroom as school board members and bond measure advocates sold us parents and staff a story. They sold us the story that if we supported and rallied our region to pass the bond, we were gonna have to give up our school site, but we would still be nearby once the old building was fixed. We cried and we fought. YG was our home and has been a part of my own personal family for over 20 years. Takako Sensei and all the other teachers and volunteers are friends, allies, and guardians of our children. But we looked into the future and seeing the building falling apart and space decreasing with increasing enrollment numbers, finally agreed. We got on board, helped the North Region pass the bond. I know these conversations happened because I was the PTO board secretary for every single one of them. So this is how I understand it. The district's idea is to not only bulldoze the gem that is our nation's first Japanese immersion program, but to secretly and permanently close another elementary school without warning, after the bond was passed, of course, leaving corridor families scrambling and neighborhood schools jammed beyond capacity. And finally, to bulldoze the now North Eugene High School old school in order to put in turf fields. Grass. Let me explain what the message you are sending to our community sounds like. 4J believes fake grass is more important than the legacy of our immersion program, its students, and our Japanese community and people. 4J believes fake grass is more important than having equity in the placement of our robust immersion programs between all regions of our town. 4J believes fake grass is more important than the education of current and future North Eugene area students, giving zero regard to class sizes, accommodations, and access to a free and equitable education in comparison to other regional schools. 4J believes that fake grass is more important than the support and opportunities that our immersion program offers to our district's ELL populations, as well as our North Region BIPOC students and those in poverty. 4J believes fake grass is more important than honoring their own words and promises they made to our and your constituents. Whomever told you that this idea was acceptable was tone deaf. And quite honestly, there maybe needs to be more education on the past relationships between white leaders in this state and their policies with the Japanese people. This decision reeks of inequity and racial and economic privilege, especially when the move to the South region removes now 2 elementary schools from this region, all at the very same time that hundreds of homes and apartments are now being built in our region. To call this short-sighted is an understatement. To wrap up, as a high school teacher, we hear weekly about the need and urgency that we must attend to our students regarding the dividing bridge between students of color and other vulnerable groups in order to try and help our students not fall through the cracks, help them find a connection and a desire to be at school to finish their education instead of disconnecting or giving up. Students need to be honored and seen for the diverse gifts they hold in order to belong. The problem here is that programs like that at YG don't matter as much as turf fields, it seems to you. That BIPOC diversity, languages, and culture don't matter as much as athletes at a high school. So why should they even try? Treatment towards YG confirms that it's all a lie anyway. That you say the words belonging and equity, but you don't mean it. It's a lie wrapped up in green. Green turf, green money. What a legacy you're illustrating to the community. Green is really the only color that matters.
Mr. Reed, and our last speaker tonight is Sophia Nance. Sophia here? I guess that concludes our speakers tonight.
I want to say thank you to everyone who came and spoke. We really appreciate the community input, and having the chance to hear from you is invaluable and will definitely come into play when we make our decisions. So thank you. I appreciate you being here and signing up to speak. Just taking a moment to process. There was a lot of emotion, and I appreciate you sharing your raw feelings with us. So next up on the agenda are comments by employee groups. Tonight we have Sabrina Gordon from EEA signed up to speak. If you would like to start, Sabrina.
Thank you, Maya. My name is Sabrina Gordon, and I'm the president of Eugene Education Association. It's been a busy year, and it's a little hard to believe that there are only about 8 weeks remaining. One of the projects we've focused on this year has been planning for a new high school schedule. It's been a collaborative effort between the district and EDA, beginning with identifying shared values that include improving access, opportunity, and support for students we have not historically served well. Other shared values are providing all students with more opportunities for enrichment and academic support, more time for educators to collaborate, and promoting positive relationships for students and staff. During the planning efforts this year, 4J and EEA have collaborated to create meaningful space for educator voice to inform decisions. 4J has supported this work with compensation for dozens of educators who have participated on committees to discuss options and forward recommendations to district leaders. Throughout this work, EEA has called for clear communication, the same thing we heard requested tonight from 2 of our student board members. We've asked for communication about why this change is happening, how the chosen schedule will meet each of the shared values, and how educators will be supported in making this enormous transition. But with only 8 weeks to go, it is very clear that our members have not received adequate communication. We don't yet know the purpose of Flex Day. We don't yet understand how we'll be providing interventions or extensions. Educators still need to talk through concerns about having less instructional time to cover content. There's conflicting information about how the schedule will work for part-time staff. There are concerns about having 3 different lengths of periods within each week, and there are many, many other questions. With only 8 weeks left, it's hard to imagine how this information will be adequately communicated in time for educators to process it all and feel confident about next year. So tonight, EEA is repeating 2 suggestions that we've previously made. First, district leaders need to go talk with educators. This needs to happen immediately and consistently until teachers feel informed and confident enough to tackle this huge change. Leaders also need to listen to educators to understand the challenges presented by this change and the support we'll need from you. And second, seriously consider starting next year with a simpler version of the new schedule. Understand and acknowledge that shifting to a block schedule is a big enough change to tackle next year without all the other complexities we're trying to add in. Many details have potential, but remain nebulous at this very late date. EEA has worked hard to be collaborative in this process, but our repeated calls for transparent and consistent communication have not yet been honored, and the resulting anxiety is hampering the likelihood that we'll be able to successfully pull this off in time for next year. Educators want this to be successful for students, and we need your support in making that possible.
Sabrina. Next up is Seth Thaflin from MAPS.
Good evening, Board Chair Rabassa, school board members, Superintendent Dye, and everyone in the listening audience tonight. My name is Seth Laughlin, and I'm the president of MAPS. As most of you know, MAPS is our Eugene School District employee group that represents our 4J managers, administrators, professionals, and supervisors. One of my favorite parts of MAPS is that we use a substantial chunk of member dues to fund annual scholarships at each of our 4J high schools. In fact, these scholarships are the biggest budget item for MAPS. This year, we are proudly sponsoring a $1,000 scholarship at each of the 5 high schools: North, South, Churchill, Sheldon, and Echo. Our focus for these $1,000 scholarships is for first-generation college attendees. This morning, we sent out MAPS scholarship information and the applications to staff in each high school. May 19th is the deadline to apply for these scholarships. On May 26th, the MAPS board will review the applications and select the recipients. If you are listening to this board meeting and you know a graduating senior who might benefit from this scholarship, please follow up with your high school career center, principal, or counselor to connect your student to the MAPS scholarship application. Please help get this information to students who would benefit the most from it. These scholarships are only one way that MAPS members contribute to our 4J community. One of the strongest values we hear from our MAPS members is to build community in each school and across the district. The word community comes to us from the original Latin, literally breaking down to mean come, which means together, with munus, which means ready to be of service, as in the word municipality. MAPS employees strive to exemplify that word and this work. Our positions exist solely to help provide public educational services to students, and we want every student and staff in this district to feel a true sense of belonging in school communities that center mutual well-being, that hear the students, that hear the parents. Sometimes our district does get stuck on differences of opinion. We're hearing some of that tonight. It is natural that that happens in life, but we do not have to remain stuck or at odds. At the end of the day, our wish for MAPS is that we come back together and we always focus on the students. True community is coming together to be of service and to take care of each other, listening and talking together so our differences don't divide us. Our differences can make us stronger when we hear each other, honor perspectives, and always come back together in service to our students. Thank you, and good evening.
Thank you, Seth. Next up on our agenda is our comments and committee reports by individual board members. Everybody ready to go? Judy?
First of all, I wanted to thank everyone that came out tonight. I really learned a lot from your comments and felt your passion, and we will have a full conversation tonight when the agenda item comes up. So thank you for your thoughts. And I'm going to start my comments by thanking the Equity Department for the program they're doing this year. I watched, I think, all the movies they put out there, the latest Race to Be Human. And I really hope, it was a really wonderful documentary where they had that 4J Equity Department makes available these links to these great documentaries. And this one had lots of students, and I thought it was a way to cover topics that was just very real and mixed with about 10 different students' life experience. So it was very worthwhile. I hope a lot of parents and students got to see them, and staff as well. This is the time of year, I think the superintendent talked about this, that the school district thinks about budgets for the next year. The 4J Budget Committee has been meeting and digesting information about our revenues and expenses for the last few years and looking ahead for the next few years. This year, as are all odd-numbered years, even more challenging because we don't really know what allocation the legislature is going to make to the state school fund and to other sources of public school funding, such as the student investment account, high school success account, or the CTE. In addition, school districts around the country are really facing the end of their ESSERS funding that we have received during the pandemic to offset pandemic expenses and to enhance services and supports for student needs, which haven't gone away. The last of these funds must be spent by 2024. Many districts around the state and the nation are really talking about the cliff they're facing, anticipating the end of ESSERS dollars and the real possibility that the state school fund this time won't be funded to the level that will allow districts to sustain what they have. There are many unknowns and it's very, very unsettling. 4J is facing the same circumstances, but we're in a little bit different situation than most other districts right at this moment in time. Our past 4J school boards have built up reserves that we can use to mitigate many of the reductions that may otherwise need to be made faster. I'm very grateful to the foresight of previous school boards, and they've shown by managing our district resources to anticipate the lean years of funding. After all, if we look at history, we know that does teach us that we have years of adequate funding. Our economy, our school funding is so based on the economy, and we know there are ups and downs in that. So it's time for us to be laser focused on how we align our spending with our income and ensure we maintain a stable and well-paid workforce. And we also sustain the essential supports we've added for our students, such as mental health, affinity groups, and universal access to healthy meals. Our district budget, as many of you know, is about 87 to 88% made up of staff, which are salaries and benefits. So that's the vast majority of our expenses. We must be thoughtful stewards of our resources and think about today and tomorrow as we thoughtfully navigate our budgeting process.
Thank you, Maya. I thought I'd go follow up with Judy, since she actually covered a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. Judy and I are in the legislative committee together, and we're looking at ways that we can actually support the district in shoring up some of the work that we can do at the legislative level to help make the case. And I struggle with this, not because it's difficult to make the case. Everything in our public community, everything stems from having a strong, healthy education system in a community that supports that. And there isn't a single public priority that has been named by our state legislator that isn't tied directly to an education outcome that can be linked. Everything from housing to the mental health to everything from climate change on there. As Judy mentioned, as we're dealing with this budget committee and the process we're going through, I also struggle with a balance. The last gentleman who spoke as a parent in the community, I hear you, and I appreciate the words that you said about making sure that our parents' voices are heard. And I struggle with the balance of, we live in a community that struggles with so many basic needs. And I'm so grateful that we live in an environment that supporting feeding our children and supporting their mental health care and just making sure that they're taken care of at their most fundamental. But education isn't just about the fundamentals, right? We want to build a society that creates some joy. You want to be part of civic engagement. There's some education systems that you want to have participation in arts and community and activities that turn you into the person, the adult you want to be. And those are, to a certain extent, where our gaps in funding really show up. And it's a difficult balance to achieve those things. And while I am so thankful that we can support the basic needs of our students, unless we have the parents who can stand up and make the priorities visible and show how these other enhancements actually matter to our children and contribute to our economy and those changes, it's very difficult for just a school board to do it alone, right? And we do this, and we like to be a voice for that. But as we vote and as we give our voices to what matters to in legislation, as we support priorities moving forward all across, looking at things like we have a board that really supports career and technical education, but arts and music and the things that bring joy to life. Those are all important, and education is a pathway into developing those components of a civic society that is actually joyful and meaningful. So it's not just about the math and literacy. I think all of that matters. All those are components of it. And I struggle with this balance every year. It's a big reason why I took the opportunity to join the school board. And it's been eye-opening to a certain extent on the difficulties of being able to balance that. The other thing I wanted to mention is the teacher who spoke up about our doses. I think this is also tied directly into that. Like Judy mentioned, the key components and all of our staffing and the budgets are going towards staffing and resources. And I think there's a balance there too. We need to have priorities. We're supporting a new language arts curriculum. We're supporting new social studies curriculum. We're building the components of the education and the subject matters we really want to hone in on and make sure our children are achieving. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen with just providing the resources. You have to provide the support. You have to provide the training. You have to provide the development. You have to provide the resources in order to make sure your children are achieving those priorities that we have set as a board. So as we move forward, I would really like to take a look at how we are actually looking at building an entire school community that actually looks at all the components that go into actually creating a system that is supporting those children, and not just their social, emotional, and their just cognitive needs. But what are the entire supports that do that? And can we come up with a budget? And can we come up with a priority plan that actually supports a more holistic approach to how we look at systemic budgeting? So I think as we move forward, that is something I would like to continue to look at and give voice to. The other thing that have been on my mind this week has been a good and a bad thing. I struggle hugely with our epidemic of gun violence in this country, especially racially charged gun violence. And I know we've done a lot as a board to contribute to hopefully mitigating that a little bit in our schools. Just January, February, March, April, we're just the fourth month of the year. The number of students who have been dealing with this across the country, it just scares me to death as a parent on there. And I wanted to just send my wishes and just like prayers for some sort of reconciliation on what we can do about supporting that, a move away from that level of pandemic on there. On the good news, I did want to say Ramadan Kareem to those who are celebrating, and an early Eid Mubarak, and a happy belated Passover and Easter to those who did celebrate. There is an Asian family celebration happening in conjunction with 4J and Lane Community College this Friday. We'd love to see parents who come out and celebrate. We have a very large Asian community in 4J, and we'd love to be able to celebrate with all of you. So those are my thoughts for tonight. Thanks for your time.
Who would like to go next? Michelle?
I'll be quick, a lot of things have been covered. I appreciate the input from my fellow board members. I have had the opportunity to attend the meetings for County YG and listening to the stakeholders, and especially hearing the students' voices. It's clear how much they care about the wellness of each other. Students spend so much time in their school buildings, and they're really dedicating their time to coming up with solutions, and as well as creative ideas from the community. It's very, very much appreciated. And it's been really difficult attempting to come to terms with a combination of limited resources and inheriting decisions that were made in the past. Uncovering so many details of what was said in the past has been really eye-opening. And looking forward, you know, the district needs to make both Kelly and YG whole. It is about equity, and it is about equity in this entire community. As one student had said, what's good for Kelly and YG is good for everyone. So I'm hoping that there will be future securing of funding, showing commitment to these historic communities. These schools are serving the most diverse racial, socioeconomic, and cultural communities, and we need to invest in the futures of sustaining these schools, functional schools, because right now they're not functional. So thank you for sharing your hearts to us this evening. It's a really difficult situation. The only other thing that I had to comment on was this month's equity advisory meeting. We discussed a recent town hall and a bit about restorative practice in schools, which I feel needs to be prioritized. And these topics highlight the need for equity training, and I'm waiting for that to happen. That's it.
Thanks, Michelle. Alicia?
You can see my eyebrows going up. Take me. First, this last week I had the opportunity to, with most of my school board compatriots, go to the North Eugene community meeting where we got to talk about the North region and the old North, and a little bit of time to brainstorm options. And it was impressive, some of the things that came up, things I hadn't thought about. So I appreciate people coming to that, as well as got to do the budget committee, which is always exciting when you don't have to cut, because I've spent about 12 years of my time on this board cutting program, so it's been nice not to have to do that. I appreciate the invitation to come and visit, particularly I think somebody said during change of classes or during the day. I will take you up on that invitation. I'll talk to the superintendent about getting out there. I actually, it sounds wrong when I say I don't need to go to see that it's not working. So, but I do need to go, but I don't, no one has to convince me. I appreciate that it didn't work like planned. So I just want to say that. And Amanda, thank you for your comments about your father traveling and how kids, students with disabilities are educated. Sorry, it's just free thinking, but I've been to Japan twice, and both times working on advocating for students with disabilities being inclusive in educational settings in Japan, both in rural parts of Japan as well as in Tokyo. In fact, we got a permit to hold signs on the street for an hour and a half. And we had to stop the big signs. Anyhow, tonight I also wanted to talk about a situation that came up for me. A friend of mine recently spoke at a class at Churchill High School, the Lancers. The conversation before her presentation involved students talking about how they felt they didn't have a voice with building administrators or with the school board on decisions, even decisions that affected them directly. When my friend shared this story with me, it had me think about student voice during my 16 years, my time on this board. Some of the most powerful moments I remember were when we heard as a board, and made decisions based on information from students. Like the evening, this auditorium was full, like it is tonight, but it was full of young adults encouraging the board to pass the transgender policy, which we did unanimously. And I don't believe it would have passed unanimously without those voices. Also, I remember the young women's soccer players from one of our high schools, coming and talking to us about the inequality of sports fields. We as a board immediately directed the superintendent to look into the concern they shared with us. And it resulted in improved and increased athletic fields for female student athletes. And I know we're still hearing concerns, and I know we're still working on ensuring that equity. And more recently, I remember the young women from the Period Club coming in and lobbying for period projects in our school bathrooms. It was these young women and student voice that propelled us to move forward with this policy. Last year, one of our students played a pivotal role in the number of parking spaces at our new Camas Ridge. He voiced his commitment to reducing climate change impact with the decision on creating fewer parking spaces at the new Camas. Those are just a couple of places where student voice has had an impact in our decisions. At the end of last year, school year, and the beginning of this year, we as a board wanted to work on increasing student involvement and our ability to hear authentic student voices. I know we looked at ways to choose student reps, and we were looking at ways to include more student voices, and I know we've been busy with other things, but I don't see evidence that we have followed through with that commitment. So I'm wondering if we can get an update from the committee that was charged with increasing student voice to see where we are and where we need to go. I want to take a moment and talk about something I've talked about before, which is the use of Signal. At our meeting on March 1st, I inquired about when we as a board would have the discussion about the use of the Signal app. It's an app that erases your text at a set time, so it erases all your conversation. And that set time is set by users. I requested that we as a board have a discussion about this 2 months earlier, and I had the 3 votes to put it on the agenda. So on March 1st, I was following up on the earlier request. I was told that we would have the discussion at our next meeting on March 15th. Leadership did not put it on the agenda for the March 15th meeting, as it was stated, nor did they put it on the agenda for tonight. So I'm wondering what's going on. Why are we not having this discussion as required, as requested by the 3 board members? I understand that some board members were or are using Signal and may not want to have the discussion, but I believe it is imperative that we have this discussion and get this information out in the open. Also, I noticed we have a number of candidates here tonight, and I've had the opportunity to listen to a couple of candidate forums. And I've listened to the question that was asked about what candidates would do regarding the dysfunction on this current school board. I was saddened to hear that one person put the blame of the dysfunction of this board entirely on one person. The dysfunction of this board cannot be and should not be placed on the shoulders of one person. We as a board who we have board members who ran on bringing conflict to this board, and now they act surprised and disappointed at the fact that we have a board that is full of conflict and dysfunction. Again, I want to state, don't put the blame on one person. It's just not right. Thank you.
Gordon, thank you, Alicia. Gordon?
Thanks. Just briefly, I want to clarify, and Maya, maybe you can do more in your comments about use of Signal or any other messaging app. As I believe we mentioned, we're getting legal input on that, which I believe is, she said, would be in April, I believe is coming at the board retreat. And in terms of myself, I long ago stopped using Signal, as I mentioned in public, so I just want to clarify that. On more other things, first I want to thank the parents who held an autism awareness event outside this building earlier tonight. And I'm really sorry that I was stuck in meetings here and unable to attend. I also want to thank those same parents, some of those same parents and 4J graduates who did a briefing for the board last week or the week before on how we can improve services for students with disabilities and how we can move away from a behaviorist model towards a relational model of instruction. I know it's frustrating to testify here and then get no immediate feedback or response, as Amanda last mentioned. And so I want to respond briefly to a couple of things. I'm going to save my comments on North Eugene High School and Kelly NYG till when that comes up, which is going to be pretty soon in the meeting, but I just want to say that I have deeply heard what people said in testimony tonight. I do want to support the call from the EOA teacher who called on us to take the money we're now giving to Fuel Ed and instead spend it for 4J teachers and TOSAs to come up with our own curriculum, which I think would be great. I believe that the superintendent has supported that as well, and that at least in the years of COVID, everybody was too exhausted, even for pay, to spend their summers devising new curriculum, but I think that would be great. I also agree that we should be looking at implementing a simpler version of the new high school schedule, just given where we are in the year, the complexity of that, and the importance of doing it in a thoughtful and thorough way in collaboration with building level educators. The single biggest thing I want to mention tonight is something that nobody came here to talk about, but that I think is one of the single biggest things affecting problems across our district, which is the drastic underfunding of the school system because of the unfairness of our tax structure. We're about, according to the state, we're about to give away a huge kicker, which we do often. This is the most regressive thing that the state of Oregon does that works to make the rich richer, the poor poorer, and schools worse. According to what the state is now saying, if the kicker goes ahead as scheduled, people who are in the poorest 20% of Oregonians will get on average $46 in their kicker. The richest 1% of people, each person will get $44,000. 2/3 of the benefit of the kicker goes to the richest 20%, which is people who each make more than $100,000 a year. The calculation for us, for the 4J school system, is that what the kicker will cost us is $15 million. So even if we said, okay, half of it we'll give back to the people, not the 1%, to the people who actually need the money, and just the other half, $7.5 million, that would be 75 teachers, or maybe 100 EAs. 75 teachers or 100 EAs would be game changers for us, whether it's in EOA or in special education or in other places. We're in a system where the richest people get money they don't need and everybody else's kids get left behind. This is something that we can't make happen by a vote on the board, it can only happen in Salem, but it's one of the most critical things that we as board members need to be leaders on in Salem. The very last thing I want to say, smaller thing, I was glad to be out on the picket line with nurses at Riverbend at Peace Health, who are there fighting for their own contract, but also we at 4J are trying to build up greatly our career technical education in healthcare, and those nurses are also fighting to make sure that students who graduate from 4J in healthcare can actually have living wage jobs when they graduate from here into the workplace, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. I'll wrap it up. I want to start by extending an enormous thank you to our volunteers. I am beaming my appreciation your way. You all make a difference, and 4J would look very different without you. I also want to thank the community members who organized an event celebrating autism tonight. Though I could not attend, as Gordon mentioned, because of an executive session and work session before this meeting, I would like to join this group in celebrating all of our amazing autistic students, staff members, and extended community members. We are so lucky to learn with, from you, to work with you, to be in community with you. I do want to respond to the question of discussing the use of Signal. Thank you for bringing that to me, Gordon. I appreciate Alicia's concern, as the 4J board has had the experience of using text messages in a way that violates public meeting laws when discussing our former superintendent, Shelley Berman's dismissal. It was a hard lesson learned, and I appreciate Alicia's institutional knowledge in many areas, and this is no exception. The reminder to take this very seriously is well taken. And as I remember it, we plan to discuss this in April, and I assure you, we will be covering this at our retreat with a lawyer to inform our discussion. Thank you for reminding us, Alicia. I want to acknowledge the weight of the decisions before us, one tonight and another in the next few weeks. As the mother of a North Eugene High School graduate, I have my own personal affection for the building and gratitude for the experiences my son enjoyed there. I'm also someone who grew up in a trilingual home. Multilingualism matters to me a lot. I am an ardent supporter of immersion programs and would personally like to see every 4J student have access to language instruction that allows them to reach bilingual and biliterate levels. Until that dream is possible, I want to assure you that I hold an unwavering commitment to seeing all 5 immersion programs thrive. I'm carrying the weight of these decisions and assure you that I am not taking this lightly. Our North Region Visioning Subcommittee meetings focused on next steps for Kelly Middle School and Eugene-Gockwin. We shared an a la carte menu, if you will, of possible improvements and prices associated with them. We asked and subsequently received feedback from staff, students, and parents on these items and possible solutions to the challenges facing these 2 programs in their state of co-location. We'll talk more later in this meeting about the different possibilities for moving forward with these 2 programs. After a short hiatus from the series, The Heart of 4J, I return tonight to share with you about a fixture in the 4J community for over 3 decades, Kathy Tagworker, queen of the kitchen at Spring Creek Elementary School. As usual, the words of her colleagues do greater justice to lauding her tremendous heart than mine ever could. Sebastian Golden, former Spring Creek principal, says, Kathy brings joy, humor, and love in serving our students. She has decades of experience in her role and continues to bring a renewed energy daily to her position. She greets every student daily, prepares breakfast, snack, and lunch with consistency and expertise. She understands the dietary restrictions of every single student who has needs, and she predicts and adjusts meals with accuracy and precision. One of Kathy's greatest assets is her use of humor as she builds relationships with staff and students. There isn't a single person in our school community who doesn't love, adore, and respect her. Through the challenges of the pandemic and distance learning, I saw Kathy exemplify the meaning of service. She showed up every day with a plan and purpose, and she fed hundreds of students and families every day. During the beginning of this school year, our district experienced a staffing shortage and an elementary school with twice the number of students required an expert to manage their kitchen. Kathy was assigned and took the new role in stride, serving the larger school while staying connected to her kids, the students, and nutrition services at our school. In her absence, it took 4 adults, 4, to fill in and attempt to do her job. She was greatly missed at our school, and when she returned 3 months later, we all celebrated. Kathy's work and impact on the district extends beyond caring for her kids to caring for her colleagues. From president of OSEA, Sheila Wagner, Kathy has been a member for 34 years. She has been actively involved with this chapter since 1996 when she was on the food service committee, the executive board for more years than I've been here, and has even represented OSEA through lobbying in Washington, DC more than once. She's been involved in events like our ice cream socials, barbecues, and our holiday fundraisers more times than I can count. She has also chaired our scholarship committee and has been on the chapter bargaining team for over 9 different negotiations. She was instrumental in getting our food services back to healthy foods and away from the contracted out company. She has also been a special ed assistant during many summer school programs over the year. Her history with this chapter is invaluable, and she always steps up when help is needed. I've never heard a negative word about her either, and now that is something in and of itself after 34 years. She is an invaluable chapter member because in addition to her knowledge, she has an ability to speak with our members in a way that they always feel valued and listened to. She has a kind heart and knows exactly when to add a touch of humor to a difficult situation. She loves her job and will always bring up the concerns she has for our students' nutritional needs. There have been many times that she will stay after meetings or events to make sure our members are not left alone to clean up or ease a person's mind about an issue that they may not have understood. She is a person I can always count on who continually shows her strong union values through her actions. These testimonies speak for themselves. I have more, but not enough time to share them all, but I will certainly forward them to Kathy. And Kathy may not be listening tonight. She gets up daily at 4 a.m. to get to work to have breakfast ready for her kids. That alone deserves recognition and appreciation. I hope she listens later so she can hear how deeply she is loved and how much she is appreciated. Thank you, Kathy, for bringing your heart with you to work every day and for doing so for over 3 decades. We are so lucky to have you as a crucial part of the heart of 4J. Moving on, we have our consent group, items for action. We have 6 items on the consent agenda tonight. Is there a motion? Gordon?
I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Judy? Okay, Gordon moves to adopt the consent agenda and Judy seconds. Is there any discussion? Okay, let's vote then. All those in favor of adopting our consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Looks like a unanimous vote with 6 members voting in favor. That would be Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Maya Rabasa, Alicia Hayes, Michelle Shu, Gordon Lafer, and Judy Newman. Thank you. Tonight we have 2 items for information. First up, we have the Legislative Board Subcommittee. Presenting tonight are our 2 subcommittee members, Judy Newman and Hasija Kaufman.
This will be a little short update, but I'm going to lead off. So we just want, I'm just reminding the board, and some of you may know this, that both the governor's budget and the Ways and Means co-chair's budgets have proposed a $9.9 billion amount for the state school fund. The Oregon Department of Education, along with all the organizations professional organizations for education, have projected that we need $10.3 billion in the state school fund just to keep ourselves even, considering cost of living increases and inflation. So there's a $0.4 billion gap, and we're hoping the legislature will be able to fill some or all, even better, of that gap, depending on what we hear, where they find funds, and what we see in the May forecast. They give a May economic forecast, which is what they use then to make some final decisions. So Kirthi and I are on the legislative committee, which you've heard, and we've been meeting with our 4J finance folks because we've been asked, every district has been asked to translate that to what it means to your own district. So for us in 4J, for a biennium, that means $6 million of money that would be under what we would need, or $3 million a year. And, that translates to real, as I said, 87 to 88% of this is staff and benefits. So we are going to really be strong about writing a letter on behalf of our board and going and testifying to do all we can to have education fully funded. So we'll be meeting with our local legislators, several of whom are on Ways and Means, and also the Ways and Means leadership. Kirthi, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Jay, thanks for saying that. I think I just wanted to reiterate again, this is what we're talking about on just keeping our district functional moving forward. This isn't so much even looking at additional funding right now. So I just want to keep reiterating what that means. So anything else additional, we need all community support for us to be able to actually make the case for that.
And I just wanna also say one last thing, I'm with you 100%, Gordon, we need a different tax structure. So, I think we need a statewide effort, the kicker's gonna require 2/3 majority, constitutional change, so let's get on it.
Thank you, Judy and Kathy. The next item for information will be presented by Superintendent Dye, and that is a discussion of the possibility of re-engaging a relationship with the Eugene Police Department.
Thank you. As a bit of background, in June 2020, a decision was made to, at a point in the future, end our partnership as it existed at that time with the Eugene Police Department, with the charge to district staff, and in concert with members of the board to explore what a more comprehensive youth services effort would look like. In that time, we've added quite a few things in the district. We've added partnerships with 15th Night, Ophelia's Place. We have partnerships with Oregon Social Learning Center for substance abuse therapy. We have a number of efforts to do suicide prevention, post-vention, working internally on, as you said earlier, restorative justice. We still have a long ways to go, but I believe regardless of your perspective on the role that the police department should play or shouldn't play in our district, at the time, having SROs alone was insufficient to provide wellness and the breadth of services that students need. Make no mistake, police officers, the SROs that we had good relationships with students and had training specific to working with high school age students, secondary age students, but they were called to do things that they were not trained to do. They are not mental health crisis intervention individuals. We now have partnerships with groups that provides that. I do believe that it is clear from some members of the public that they want the board to engage in the district, to engage in conversations about what it would be like to identify a new role for the Eugene Police Department. I can say from my office as the superintendent, my role as the director of secondary services, and my role as the principal at South Eugene High School, that regardless of the community agencies that we bring in without a partnership with EPD, that too will be insufficient. Right now, we are taxing their patrol officers significantly when we call them in. There's absolutely no doubt that we will have an ongoing relationship and a need for members of the Eugene Police Department, not for school discipline, but for criminal investigations that involve our students, and for investigations that students are requesting them to do on their behalf. We need to have some really clear guidelines and parameters, because we don't want, if we were to bring them back, police officers to simply present in an enforcement posture. We want people to know them if they're in our schools and have good relationships with them if they're in our schools, and to be really clear on the role that they would play, and have very clear expectations, not just among staff and members of the board, but the school district itself and the community as a whole. There's not an effort this evening to force some type of decision or to schedule necessarily when a decision would be made, but to formally ask that we engage in conversation about what that might look like. If nothing else, then to direct me to go gather information to come back and present it to you, so that we could determine what that relationship might be. I'm more than happy to take any questions that folks have. Judy?
I just had a question. I would like to know, when we do need to call law enforcement, what's the response like and how has that gone? And really what I'm looking for is what's fallen through the cracks or has become more difficult? You have an emergency in school.
In emergency situations, they're responsive, right? When they do respond, EPD are trained individuals and they come and attend to our needs. However, they're not familiar with our schools. They don't have relationships with administrators or staff. They don't have relationships and know the ethos of the school. the way that our SROs did. They were in the building most every day. And so I can't help but think that people that know our schools and get training on working with school-aged children approach challenging conversations in a way that a patrol officer who does not have that disposition and that training, it's very different. We get a random assortment of officers that come to us when we call. So not that we call them every single day, but if we did over a 5-day period of time, we might end up with 5 different teams of officers. We do know also that they're around to provide us with support when we have investigations for things that aren't necessarily involving things that happen at school, but involve our students in ways that it impacts their access to their education. We just don't have that connection with that investigative arm that allows us to get information in a timely manner to make decisions about how to keep students safe and protected so that we can maximize their ability to access a hostile-free environment and obstacle-free education. By no means would I want to say, we called them and they haven't shown up. That's not the case. We have called them and it's taken some time because of the similar decrease in staffing that they've experienced over the last several years, and they're really stretched thin. I would say that were we to re-engage with EPD, we would probably have a more refined scope of responsibilities we would want them to fulfill.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Alicia?
Thanks, Glenn. Well, I've wanted to have the conversation because when we did decide not to go with the contract with EPD, it was then COVID, and it was never the intent not to look at how we engage in a more effective way with all our schools with EPD. And so I am very happy this is on, and I appreciate the pace at which you're putting it, just in terms of what is possible, how do we build a system for our schools that is most effective for all our schools, students. So if it's okay, and Ms. Gordon, you want to do it? I was gonna make a motion, so. You good?
This is, I'm sorry, this is item for information.
I thought it was that. Sound for information. Oh, thanks. Well, just go forward and do it. I'm so excited that I've wanted it for so long. It's. You're just telling us you're gonna have it? You don't want like a thumbs up, go for it, buddy?
What I want, what I get, oftentimes very good.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you won't make a motion then, Gordon.
Just
Does anybody?
not fair warning, but clearly, I would bring this back to the board as an item for future action so that we can continue the pace. We will absolutely, at that point in time, when we have more information and more discussion, frame community engagement process so that we can gather information from everybody impacted by our youth services efforts, not just Eugene Police Department, but try to get information and at the same time share information so that when I say youth services efforts, it's not just a term that everyone defines differently. So thank you very much.
Why did you say that?
Judy, and then I'd like to jump in behind you.
Great. I just want to say, I'm really glad you're gonna bring back information about the conversation, and I would ask, I really know the list of things you talked about. It would be nice, and I don't even know how to visualize this, a constellation, a diagram, student safety, where all these things fit, and then what specifically, if we're talking to having officers, what they do, but I think the enhancements and the broader approach to safety for kids is really critical. So I don't know, I'm happy, it's some way to visualize that so the community can see that too.
I'd like to suggest that we consider doing a work session and also seeing if we can have this conversation as a continuation of the work that we did alongside the Sea Change Consulting Group, so that we don't lose that work and that it continues to be connected. There was a lot that we gleaned from their work that I think would really inform whatever decision and steps we take here. So that might be better suited for a work session than just jumping into another agenda item, so that we can kind of get into the nitty gritty. But I'm not sure who's at leadership next time. Maybe we can talk about that then. So, all right. Oh, Michelle. Oh, okay. Well, Michelle will be at leadership, so thank you. I thought you wanted to talk. Okay. Does anybody, and for those listening, the Sea Change organization was looking through their own equity lens. They didn't use 4Js at the impact of discipline and other related actions towards students and how that impacted different students differently. So that just to catch up folks who might not have been around for those conversations. All right, well, if there's no other questions or comments, thank you, Superintendent Dye. And next up, we have items for action. There's 3 items on the agenda, and the first item is the existing North Eugene High School building decision. We've had this on our agenda a few times, and we have all had access to the materials. So maybe to jump into a discussion, if somebody has a motion that can get us rolling.
So we can hold the booze. Okay. We put a motion forward on action items. I know you think I don't remember what an action item is, but we put a motion forward so that you can, we can have a discussion. Just FYI. So and we'll speak to the motion pro or con after I put it forward. So I move that we, I'm trying to find the words, raise the North Eugene building, demolish the North Eugene building, and put in the fields as has been planned or stated. So we go back. I move that we remove the North Eugene building, the old North Eugene building from the North Eugene site. And before we can discuss it, we need a second.
Is there a second? Okay, Michelle? Okay, so moved by Alicia Hayes to initiate discussion and seconded by Michelle Shu. That leads us into a discussion regarding the decision on what to do with the existing North Eugene High School building. Are there questions or comments that anybody would like to start with?
So I'm the maker of the motion, so I get to go first, lucky me. So it was proposed, people talked about us waiting, and I would just like the superintendent to explain again why we're in this situation. Before you do that, I just have to do a shout out and an honor to my fellow board member who's no longer on the board with me, Mary Walston, who for years said we're kicking the can down the road. And we've got to deal with YG and the North region, and you know, sometimes admitting your mistake is the best thing you can do. And we, as a board, did not do that. We did it. I believe we hoped, we put a lot. Hope is not a plan, and yet we went with hope, and it hasn't worked out like we had hoped. So I just want to admit that before we get started, and also say to Mary, you were right.
Issue around timing, was that the question?
tiny, what's it gonna cost us to keep it up?
Sure, so, we have SDC fees, System Development Charges fees, that have to be paid in full prior to taking full occupancy in the new North Eugene High School. Right now, the city's system reflects that we have our SDC fees on contract. And we established that contract in June of 2021, which basically said we would pay them, and we received the invoices for those. We have temporary occupancy right now so that we can have people in the building. We can, as they're ready, we can begin to identify rooms for teachers to go to and move a few things in, but we have to finalize that SDC payment that is $725,000 prior to getting our full occupancy permit from the city of Eugene. School's gonna start in September, and a move in a building of that size, we need to begin to think about not just books, but we've got millions of dollars of furniture that is arriving that we need to get built and put into the rooms. We have CTE, science classrooms, art classrooms, lots and lots of things that we need to move over there as quickly as possible so that we're guaranteed that we can be ready for school in September. So the decision about this building has to be paid, because if we want final occupancy, we simply pay the SDC fees. If we subsequently decide to do something different with the building, we simply pay those fees, and it's generally speaking, a non-refundable fee. We wouldn't pay it and then get it back if we made a different decision. And again, I can very much appreciate the desire for more conversation. But my concern would be that it would again be delaying an incredibly difficult conversation if we move further to get down the road.
Judy?
I just wanted to ask, and I apologize, I had to step out, interesting, so I hope I'm not repeating anything. So one of the speakers tonight that came with data, and it's good data, I appreciate it. I'd like to hear a little more details, and I know we have seen some of this, maybe some of the public has or has not. Looking at the deferred maintenance plan and what it would cost, we're hearing a total of up to 34 million. And so maybe you could just outline some of the big things like that, because that I think was a surprise to many of us.
The price was not, the cost associated with the deferred maintenance was not that high when we made decisions back in 18 and 19. Since that time, we've had a pandemic, and cost escalations have gone up 36 to 40%. So we need, if we were to repurpose the existing North Eugene High School, we would have to do some of the deferred maintenance that we have not done in the last several years, and that includes a new roof. And the estimated cost for the new roof is $15 million alone. We would have to put in a new boiler and piping, do asbestos abatement, paint, sealant, fire suppression, and HVAC. Because once we begin to spend over a certain threshold, new city codes kick in. We would have to get things up to code that are currently not up to code. So the estimates for what we would need to do to get that building to a place where it could be repurposed are $34 million. And then, depending on the purpose that we would use it for, there would inevitably be, even if it was a little or even if it was a lot, there's a cost associated with the remodeling that we would do.
Gordon?
Thanks. I want to thank the superintendent in particular for not just that information, but all the information that we've gotten in the last couple of months about this. I want to talk some both about the building and about the process of how we got here and where we're at. To start with, I think I just think there's no question that the North community was misled. In the bond, there was $10 million allocated for moves of Kelly, YG, and Corridor, and one of the options that everybody was told would be there after the temporary co-location was to move into the old North Eugene High School building. I will say, though it's too late to matter now, I was the lone vote on the board who voted against closing Corridor at that time. Since the bond was passed, we've had COVID, and construction costs have gone up by 40%, as the superintendent said. But if it was $10 million, 40% would make that 14 million, not 34 million. This was before my time. I wasn't on the board. I think Alicia and I'm not sure about Judy were the only members of the board who were there at the time. And I want to clear I'm not suggesting bad faith on anybody's part. I don't know how this happened, but however it happened, the end result is that the community was misled. And I have to say, I don't think that that kind of communication or the forced co-location of Kelly and YG that's happened over the last 3 years is something that we would have seen in South Eugene. And that means we have an extra burden to do everything we can possible to do right by these schools. So right now we're at, the numbers are what they are, and we're at where we're at. It's $34 million just to get the Old North up to code without yet spending the money that I assume could be, I don't know, $10 million, $20 million to turn it into a real elementary or middle school. And I understand that by putting this off even may cost us $750,000, as the superintendent described, which is a ton of money. I do not believe that the co-location should continue. I believe that Kelly needs its own school and YG needs its own school. And YG needs a space in which it can grow and have enough, extra classes so that you don't have to worry about the attrition from kindergarten to the end of the school. And given all of this, honestly, I came here tonight ready to vote to close, to vote for this proposal, to knock down the Old North, because I just don't see how the numbers add up any other way. But the thing that affected me tonight more than anything else is the people who talked about this history of being misled, of being asked for input and then watching that input be ignored. And I know that's true. I sat in this room packed with people from Kelly and YG in multiple meetings, and that input had no impact. I saw surveys go out asking for public input, and lots of public input came in, and then whatever was going to be done was done anyway. I want to be clear, this is not fault of Superintendent Dye or General McCulley or any of the current leadership. This happened 3 years ago, and I feel like the current leadership is in the position of trying to do the best with a situation that it didn't create. But that history makes me believe that even if it costs us money, for the sake of acting in good faith, we have to put off this decision. So that the kind of transparency that was asked for in somebody's comments, just total transparency, where does the 34 million come from? What are the things? What are the real options? What are not the options? Can happen. I'm not sure there's another conclusion ultimately that the district can come to, and I understand why my colleagues on the board may vote to do this because the numbers are really daunting. And really this discussion should have happened 3 years ago, but here we are. Here we are with the money, and here we are with the process. So given all that, I feel like I can't vote to make the decision tonight, and that we have to take a little more time, put it off, and try to provide the complete transparency of the kind that the superintendent has been a leader in providing, and then come back to make this decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Judy?
As we did put off the decision tonight about the North, how long would we have to continue this conversation before? My understanding is there's money that would be potentially lost. I don't know. I mean, that's how I read the information. So how long would we have? The $600,000 for the $700,000 for the whatever the permit is to
System
continue.
development charges,
System
fees
development,
associated
yeah.
with system development charges. Well, it would have as long as we would want until we take possession of the building.
Okay.
I mean, I want to be clear, that we do have a choice to take possession of the building, pay a fee. I don't know that that's necessarily a wise use of dollars, and so, I don't honestly know how much more information and processing could be done between now and the next meeting. And at that point where it's May, and we'll be behind schedule. We're paying to store furniture that has already arrived now, with people waiting to put together, get it in the building.
Oh, never mind.
You can go first. I can go after you.
Actually, I was just following up, so we have to pay the SDC, the service, development charge, as soon as we occupy, or I thought there was a date certain.
In order to get occupancy, my last conversation with Kyle was that there's full anticipation that the project will be done with nothing more than punch lists at the end of this month.
So I'm just trying to save us 7 employees, if you will. And still have time for more processing for the folks that need it. So if we put it off till our next meeting, which is, sorry, grab my calendar.
It's May 3rd.
May 3rd. That just means they can't move in for 2 more weeks, right? So the city charges us when we move in, like landlord, right?
Yeah, we have the invoices right now. I'm sure that they would love for us to pay, or tell them that we're not going to. So I'm going a bit out on a limb. I don't want to assure folks in the room and folks listening that the city's like, yeah, that's okay. I need to gather some more information and frankly make a request that we delay.
That's confusing, because it sounded before like the only thing we would be delaying was moving in. Right, but we're delaying moving in and we might be charged.
Well, we currently have the charges. The charges will be levied against us if we decide that the building stays.
I understand that.
And so right now, I suppose, and I don't mean to be incoherent.
I'm just trying to figure it out.
But the longer we wait to pay those fees or make a public decision to remove the building, the longer it is until we can take occupancy of the building and begin to move in.
Right, so here's my question, thanks Maya, can I still go? Okay. I think this is a really tough decision. I think, I don't think we were in bad faith, I think we, like I said, we hoped it was an idea that came up from one of our board members to even keep the Old North. And sometimes when you have to make tough decisions, you look for easier paths. Maybe that's what happened. That being said, if in 2 weeks, Gordon, you think you could make a decision and get more information that you need to make that decision, then we may just need to tell the folks at North Eugene High School they gotta wait. That seems to be our option, or to see if we can get it through tonight and have some people say, I know I wanna wait. And I think the more we bring everybody along, the better. It just makes for better decisions, so, just my thoughts.
Go ahead.
And I don't want to take a cowardly path with anybody here or anybody on the board and say, well, the decision's ultimately up to the city. This is a decision that we have to make. This is a decision that allows us to continue in the process of determining what the future of Kelly and YG are. There are many ways in which these 2 issues, what to do with the existing north and what does the future of YG look like, that there's some intersection there. But the future of YG is not solely dependent on the existence of what is currently the old North Eugene High School building. There are big decisions. If it were to stay, there are big complex decisions to be made. If it's to go away, there are big complex decisions to be made. I don't think that there is an easy path forward, regardless of the decision that is made, because both will require money that we do not have. There have been some questions about why don't we take the money that we had used to propose the purchase of eWeb. Much of the money that was used or that was proposed for the purchase of eWeb is associated with ESSER. And that goes away in September. We can't spend that money for something that will come to us after September of 2024. And if we were going to, for example, remodel the existing North Eugene building, we're gonna have to go through an entire design process, get permits. We're 8 months out, maybe a year out, before we even swing a hammer. So that money, while some of it will exist, the lion's share of the money that would have allowed us to purchase eWeb and potentially move YG here, or do something else with this instructional space, that window's gonna close on us and that money goes away. And so, while for some members of the board it would make sense, why don't we just take the money from that proposal that didn't pan out and add it to this and do something, that's not gonna be possible. So just to provide that level of clarity, we will not have that possibility. So again, to reiterate, whether North Eugene High School stays or the existing North Eugene High School goes, we have very complex decisions to make that are dependent on money that we currently do not have in reserves, money that we do not have in the bond, money that we do not have access to in ESSER.
I don't want to be a stickler, and if folks want to be flexible, then that works with me, but technically we should be discussing the motion that's on the table. And I appreciate Gordon's suggestion to postpone it, but I think that if we're going to talk about that, we need to make that as a motion. I'm wondering if it might be worth, for the purpose, when I hear $725,000, I know I'm a broken record. I can see Andy probably giggling. I see 7 teachers. I see 12, 13 EAs. I might be getting that number wrong. And that's really hard for me to swallow. I also am I'm wondering if, and Alicia, you can respond to this because it would be a friendly amendment to your motion. If maybe the motion could be separated, you made it in a 2-part motion, and we could do what we do with the building, and then the discussion about the remaining space could be separated out from that. I don't know, again, if that's the kick the can down the road and me feeling very emotionally charged. And I'm trying very hard to be driven by my logic versus my emotion, and sometimes they get overwhelmed. So feel free to say no thank you to the amendment, but I just want to make sure we stick to the motion on the table, and if we want to change the conversation, that we do it in a way that we can keep track of what we're actually talking about.
Thanks, Maya. You posed an interesting question. I'm not sure I want to change it just yet. I might just want it to see if it passes or fails. I don't know. But I am curious, and I think this falls within the discussion about raising the building. If I ask Gordon, what would be different if we postponed by 2 weeks? Because I don't see us getting to postpone much longer than that. So I'm just curious, what would be different in 2 weeks or even a month? I guess I can, I know everybody in North Eugene is wincing right now about postponing moving in, but, so Gordon, what would, you said you'd like more time, what would we do at that time?
I'll call on myself. I think the community needs more time. It's not so much me saying, oh, I need this information or something. And I think that even though I would guess that for the superintendent, it feels like I've given this information out 10 million times in 10 million different ways. The truth is it hasn't gotten that far out, and people say like, okay, maybe we can believe the $34 million, but we need to see like what are the actual things that add up to that numbers, or what are the different possibilities. And sometimes you have discussion with the community and things, ideas come up that you didn't think about before, so I can't tell you, oh, it's exactly this, but I think we need to be open to that, and I think, the process has been so problematic that we need to be, as much as we can, in good faith. So I guess what I would like to see, and I take, I take seriously the money as well, and if the resolution passes tonight, it passes. I guess what I would like to see, first of all, I do think a month is much more realistic for any kind of community process than 2 weeks, is the superintendent to explore to the extent it's possible with the city or with, what the real deadline is. And if it comes back and says, 2 weeks from tonight, you need to decide this, or you lose $700,000, then we'll need to make that decision then. If we could put it off for a month, and if there could be another round of maximum transparency about everything connected to this. And I'm not sure, and would trust the superintendent as to the best way, and would trust General Cully also as the best way to involve community that's not, it's easy to say community and then it ends up being a small number of people or tokenistic or something like that. I'm not sure what's the best way to do that, but I think there are people who know that better than I do, and that's what I would like us to spend a month. And like I said, we should have done this 3 years ago, and then instead of saying, what can we cram into a month, we would have been saying, what can we do in a more thorough way over the year? So it's not great, but here we are. So to me, that seems like the best we can do. So that's what's in my head.
Judy?
Could someone repeat the motion that's on the table? I'm not sure now what's on the table that was, you were suggesting separating them.
I think Alicia declined to separate them, which is fine. I think the motion is to raise the building and put in the playing fields.
I'm fine separating them, I just wanted that answer before. What's the second? But you get color, where you want.
So I guess the motion, Judy, is to raise the building. Just simply. Gordon, I understand the idea behind postponing it, and I also worry that we might be continuing to lead people in a direction that isn't fair. I think that going to these meetings, and I don't know, Michelle, you might disagree with me, but there's a lot of emotion. There's a whole lot of accumulated hurt and trauma, and it feels like it might be really important to make a decision so people can start healing and envisioning a different path or the path that they have in mind. I don't know what the vote will be. I just worry that it's kind of like when we were at the North Forum, there was a parent, and I believe they are a YG teacher, who said, like, it feels like like when you're a parent and you offer your kids 2 choices and they're not, it's like, you want broccoli or you want broccoli. But I feel like saying in 2 weeks is like that horrible thing you hear as a child when a parent says maybe, and you're like, what do you mean maybe? Just tell me. And I'm worried that we might be continuing that pathway of just kind of like what you mentioned, that the communication, I forget exactly how you put it, but it's been fraught with lots of problems, and it hasn't felt, for good reason, people have felt like they haven't heard it straight. And I feel like it's the most respectful thing to do, to say it straight. The one thing that I think does hold some space for maybe discussion is what that space ends up looking like. It makes sense in some ways for it to be soccer fields, but perhaps that decision could be separated out and that could come later. But I don't know. I worry that 2 more weeks, it's just, I'm not sure if it's fair, if we're not gonna be getting more information to guide us. That's just where I stand. But I understand. I like to say maybe to my kids because I don't like to say no, and sometimes I don't want to say yes. Alicia?
So Michelle was the second on that, so you accept the friendly amendment to nix the fields as part of the, motion and move forward with just the raising of the building. That's what we're
That
talking
makes
about.
sense at this time.
Just got a little ahead. Or whatever. I love your analogy of maybe. I feel like later on our agenda, we've got to look at ways to support YG in its articulation through the system, which has been what I know people have been asking for years. So I appreciate the creativity or your thinking about the soccer fields not being part of it. That was a good thought, and good, and I appreciate it. Keeps more options on the table. I don't want to maybe anymore. I want to make a decision, and I want to start with how are we going to support Kelly and how are we going to support YG with what they need to be both programs in the North region. Yes.
I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but I want to make sure, I know we have a rule and I've totally let us violate it with multiple comments, and Michelle and Kirthi, I own that, I messed up, but whatever. Michelle and Kirthi, y'all haven't had a chance to speak or ask questions or give some input. Do you have anything you want to add, Kirthi?
My concern also is just that it's really difficult making these decisions, knowing the feelings people have around here too, but I don't know what prolonging is going to do in either direction. And that's the part where I'm struggling with. So, I mean, again, it's going back to what Alicia said too, which is that if there was input that we were looking at, and then we've been looking at this sort of, I mean, at least the year that Michelle and I have been on and looking at the community inputs on this piece of it too, that if there were things, what changes between now and 2 weeks from now? If I had a little bit more clarity on that, maybe it'd be closer to the maybe. But I don't know that we were going to have the resources or get us more comfortable, I would think, with that decision, but that's my feeling on it right now.
Thank you. Michelle, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just don't want to continue the low level nausea for another 2 weeks. It's yeah, it just has been weighing on me.
You know, the only thing that I want to add is that I do want to just give some credit to our superintendent for having, I know that between Michelle and I, we've thrown a lot of like, what if, and could we, and what are these numbers, and what are these numbers, and what are these numbers, and he's come back each time open-minded and not with his own you know, position on it, and just given us data, and I appreciate that. And I do think that a lot of the data has gone out, and sometimes when you get a lot, it's easy to leave off some and remember some and things like that. So when we hear, you know, can we raise $30 million? Well, sure, it's really 34. And then what do we do with the building before we put kids in there? Because we're not putting kids in there in the state that it's in now. So then that's another bunch of money. And then, for example, the ongoing annual costs are pretty significant. That's an old and large building. So it doesn't just end at those numbers. And I just want to appreciate that. I mean, I think I've called Andy like 4 times a day, every day for the last 2 months about this, except on Easter. So I want to thank you. And Gordon.
Thanks. I second that. Thanks. I think I've said it a couple times, but I really appreciate the transparency of the superintendent. I guess, for me, the answer to the question, like, what do you want, or what's the point of waiting or something, is that we heard from a number of people, very heartfelt, and I think with broad support, at least in this room this evening, asking us to hold off. I'm sure for some of those people, they feel like, I already know what the answer is, I want you to hold off now, and then I want you to hold off forever. But I think there are other people who are also saying, like, this is an enormous change in our lives and the lives of our kids, and we have some information and we don't have enough time to be sure of what this is and be sure of what all the options are. And we've been asked by people to give that more time, and especially if we have some more time before the $700,000 cliff. I guess that to me is the answer of why to do this. It's not because I can say, oh, I need to get this calculation, or I need to get, I don't have a specific thing. I think that given everything that's happened, it's, to me, it feels important to honor that. Thanks.
Thank you, Gordon. Judy?
I'm not convinced that 2 more weeks would make the difference. I think, in my mind, what would honor those sentiments is to really make ourselves a timeline and come up with some more options than we have right now about where YG and Kelly can be. I'm definitely here. It should stay in the North region, and co-location is very challenging, or it still feels very short term. So I guess my commitment to honor that would be to really work to find some other solutions and not stop till we have them and the answers. And I just want to say to some of the testimony tonight was, we had 2 board members appointed to that committee, and so we have some rules about quorums. I've listened in on Zoom because we can't just attend. It's not lack of interest in this process. So I just want to say that to people, and I will individually come out while school's in session. I saw it when it wasn't. So anyhow, that's my thought about what we can do to honor what we heard.
I appreciate that, Judy. I think that we'll dive into that a little bit tonight and continue that for sure. So I appreciate that. And I think that was the intention behind separating the multi-step motion, but I didn't mean to jump in front of you, Kirthi. I apologize. You're up.
Well, I'll just add to this free for all. I'm just kidding, Maya. Judy, thanks for putting that in a way. I think on the honoring, I did want to just say, like, I come from a community where none of my schools exist anymore that I went to, and there is a sense of homelessness attached to that, and a sense of that there are key components of my institution that aren't there anymore, and that there's a piece of me that is just lacking from where I was born and raised. And that goes for preschool all the way through high school. Those buildings don't exist, those teachers don't exist, the schools themselves don't exist. So I viscerally understand the pain of having that identity and that sense of space removed on there. And it's not something that I would take lightly in any sense of the situation. But just again, like Judy said, I also haven't been attending in person. I did listen in on the meetings that have been taking place on there. And there seems to be so much I don't know, it's not the word I'm looking for, is pain, but just a sense that the students are feeling that they're not being taken seriously in the places where they are, and that they need space, and they need their own programs, and they need their things need to be seriously as separate institutions, as separate things, that they are not all equal, and we want to treat everybody equally. We want to give them the space to grow and thrive and develop their own programming and develop where they are. And all the children in our community need to feel like they have a sense of belonging and aren't just being shuffled around place to place and being band-aided in. So I am seeing both sides to this because the sense of displacement is real. I'm a transplant to this community. I go back home and I feel like I'm a transplant there too, due to those lack of those institutions having been changed around. So I don't want to take some of those pieces of it lightly. Gordon, I hear you on the input and having those things. But what I would like to do is like looking at ways that we do honor those communities in those schools. Like a school community exists whether or not the building exists. The community has to develop in a way that supports in and around a structure, in and around an environment. Unless it's given an environment in which it can thrive in, that school community is still going to just be displaced in and of itself too. So I have a hard time understanding what 2 weeks is going to go. So I'm wanting ways that we can have people who want to honor in a way that is meaningful. I mean, are there programs that we can put in that honor the systems that they were, that the building that it was? Are there things that we can do to memorialize the sentiment that these schools have had for the community that does exist there, that has a history here? I don't know, but those are things that I think we need to be thinking about. And looking at ways that we're not prolonging something that I'm not sure a 2-week decision is going to necessarily give us the input or the clarity that we may be looking for, that pushes in one side or the other on those, but that's where I stand.
Thank you, Kirthi. When you were talking, I suddenly was thinking about all the programs and moves and rebuilds over the years and how many times, you know, even the school's getting rebuilt and everyone's like, no, we like the original structure better, just remodel it. And there's a lot of attachment to place. Place is really meaningful. And this is not, like you said, it's been, and I agree, this isn't something any of us are taking lightly. I don't want to prolong this any longer, but I also don't want to cut anybody short. So if anybody has questions for Dr. Dye or other comments, considerations, now's your chance. If not, we'll go ahead and call the question. Okay. All the, oh, Michelle? Somebody say Michelle? Oh, no. Sorry. All those in favor of raising the existing North Eugene High School building, raise your hand and say aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The motion passes 5-1 with yes votes from Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Alicia Hayes, and Ira Abassa, Michelle Shu, and nay votes from Gordon Lafer. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the conversation, how we went through that.
Mike, we do a 5-minute break, we've been at it since 5, as you know.
Yeah.
Is that
It's
possible?
Yeah, it's 9:35, but probably almost 9:36. So let's go to 9:41 and then come back and move on to board security measures. Get started again. It's 9:53 and we have a lot still left on our agenda, including a really important conversation that is linked to this one. And I don't want it to get so late that we lose folks and also become too tired to do this thoughtfully. So next, as an item for action, we have board security measures. For those listening, the board's received recommendations from Foresight Security on steps we can take to improve security at board meetings and for board members. We've already voted on and taken action on security members outside of the shared board space for board members. But tonight we need to come to agreement and approve a motion to do the work on recommendations that impact the security at the board meetings. Is there a motion to put on the table? Gordon?
I move that we approve the two items that the district has asked for approval for, which is creation of internal doorways and the par room door reversal.
Is there a second to the motion to do the security doorways in the hallway and the par room door reversal? Michelle, seconds. Is there any discussion? Judy?
So is it just those two, because there's a cell expander that we're getting more information on, right? We're gonna continue to get more information on that. Yeah.
If we just, for now, if we could do the motion, and then if there's other motions for the other items, because there's quite a few items on there that we're not necessarily going to do. Is that okay, Judy? Thank you. So is there any discussion or questions about the security doors, specifically in the hallway leading to the par room and the par room door reversal? No? In that case, all those in favor of putting those two pieces of the recommendation in place, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. The motion passes unanimously with ayes from Kirthi Asija Kaufman, Meyer Bassa, Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, Michelle Shu, and Gordon Lafer. There were other things on that list. If we like, Judy, I didn't mean to interrupt you, and I know that you wanted to ask a question. I don't know if you want to have it linked to a motion or just go ahead and get the information.
It doesn't need to be linked to a motion. I didn't realize we were just gonna be voting on two of these, but the plan, that's fine. It works. There can be process with the other one if we go about what the plan is, so.
Vote on as many as we want, but those were just the ones that Gordon listed. There are more that we can vote on. In that case, if no one wants to put forward any of the other recommendations, then those will be the two that we go with. In that case, Judy, do you want to just get clarification for your question? I'm okay with you because I
don't even want to talk about spending any more money, to be perfectly honest. I'm good.
All right, then we move on to book and instructional materials challenge policy 2A. As it stands, it's IIA, yeah, IIA-AR2. Gordon, you want to take off with this?
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess I'll move that we adopt this, and then if there's questions, I'll say how I feel about it. That we adopt this as policy, and I believe that the district, there was something in our package of the district suggesting that then the name would change, the name change to what it says here, book and instructional material challenge policy. So I propose that we adopt this policy with the name, with the title given here, book and instructional material challenge policy.
Is there a second? Michelle Shu. So the motion is to move the AR and turn it into policy. Is that okay to word it simply like that? Okay, so moved by Gordon and seconded by Michelle Shu. Are there any questions or comments? Any discussion? Judy?
Well, first of all, I'm in favor of having some form of this in policy. It makes sense to me. It's very, very important. And I don't know when we had this conversation, because this has bothered me for a while. It is so detailed, including forms, which I think is a very unusual thing to include in a policy, that I was gonna suggest the actual forms go in AR, because if we need to change a form to go through a policy change seems crazy. That it just seems like a pretty cumbersome way to have policies. So, I like the concept, I think our intent is good, but the level of detail, including use these forms, feels onerous in policy. So I was asking for a friendly amendment.
Which would be to exclude the use these forms part, or?
Yes, to that level of detail, yes.
I personally would be fine with that as a friendly amendment. Maya, you're muted.
Okay. Michelle, did you have your hand raised? No, I thought Judy just pointed to you. Okay.
Well, I
how
thought
about-
does the second have to agree with the friendly amendment?
I agree.
Okay, great, thanks.
So my question is then what happens with those forms? What happens with that particular step? Judy?
My suggestion would be to be in the AR then. There would be an AR that supports this and the forms be in it. They're just easier, it's easier to change and keep them up if they aren't working well than going through a whole policy process.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Alicia?
I think I asked this and you gave me an answer, but I have to ask it again. We did have an attorney look at this.
We've had attorneys look at the AR. We would not have had an attorney look at the form aspect pulled out and the language specific to the policy. I was just thinking what we would do if this was approved by the board this evening is that we would draft policy language, bring that back to the board for another approval, vote on the approval, and then administrative staff would develop an AR as we had in the past for all other ARs. And have legal look at it.
So that would mean we would have to either add another friendly amendment or else vote this one down and make a new motion that asks for those things to happen and come back to us? Or ask to table it until we see the language? Dr. Beth?
It could either be tabled until you see the language, or you could adopt with an item for action at the next meeting to take a look at new policy language. Either way, it's the same end with a different means to the same end.
So then, okay, go Gordon.
I guess it seems a little silly to me to adopt a policy tonight and then we're gonna adopt a changed one in 2 weeks from now. So if your sense is that the most efficient way to get where we wanna get, which is essentially to have this as policy, is to wait 2 weeks when you can bring us the fully cleaned up language, that makes sense to me.
We can get to that.
So Gordon, do you want to revise your motion to table it until we see the new language?
In 2 weeks, right? Yeah, my motion is that we, let me tell me this, okay, we ask the superintendent to come back to us in 2 weeks with revised language that we will have as an action, item for action at that meeting.
Is that seconded again by you, Michelle? Yeah? Or Judy? Okay, Michelle, we'll just stick with the second. Okay, so unless there's any discussion, we can call this question. All right, the vote is to table this for 2 weeks until May 3rd, when we can see the revised language so we can officially approve it, if that's what the vote turns out to be. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. It's unanimously approved to table this for 2 weeks with votes from Kathy Hesija Kaufman, Maya Rasa, Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, Michelle Shu, and Gordon Lafer. Thank you, Dr. Dye, for bringing that back to us. The next item on the agenda are items for action at a future meeting. We have, oh, I'm sorry. We have 3 items for action regarding complaints. I guess we'll just go in chronological order. So the first complaint is the one that came to us on February 17th. Does somebody have a motion to make regarding this complaint? Gordon?
I would have the same motion on all 3, but given the complexity of what exactly an investigation should look like and how we pick an investigator, I would like to propose that we ask the superintendent to reach out to the complainant and ask for an extension of time. I don't know, maybe the top of a month or something else, but say a month. And if that's not okay with the complainant, then we address this in our next meeting in 2 weeks. Because that's what we need to do to be timely in terms of the complaint time too.
Okay, so is there a second for that? Okay, seconded by Michelle Shu. Is there any discussion? I'm gonna just add in then, if nobody has anything, that if we do not have a positive response from the complainant, we're gonna need to schedule a meeting before our next meeting so that we can take care of this in a timely manner, because otherwise we will run out of time if we wait until the 3rd and then have a conversation about what to do. And if folks want to have an investigation, we won't be able to be done in time. So regardless, we'll have to have an extra meeting if the person is not amenable to that. So anybody else have any input? All right, I think for me, I'm just going to stick with I'd rather make a decision tonight to just go with the investigator, but I'll vote for that when we get to it. So all those in favor of asking the complainant from February 17th to postpone the results by a month, raise your hand and say aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. Judy, were you an aye or a nay?
I was an aye.
Okay, so ayes from, sorry, I'm looking, Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Alicia Hayes, Michelle Shu, Gordon Lafer, and Judy Newman, and a nay from Maya Rabasa. So this motion passes 6-1. The next complaint is the one we received on March 8th. Is there a motion regarding this one? Gordon?
The broken record motion that we ask the superintendent to ask the complainant for a 1-month delay. And if that's not okay with the complainant, then we schedule according to whatever the timeline is, whether it's our next meeting or the specially scheduled one to be timed.
I think this one doesn't require special meetings with the timeline because it's later. Is there a second? Alicia. So the motion is to request a postponement by a month for the complainant to receive a resolution of their complaint. All those, is there discussion? Questions? All right, all those in favor of requesting a postponement of resolution, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Okay, we have 5 ayes and 1 nay. We have ayes from Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, Maya Rabasa, and Gordon Lafer, and a nay from Michelle Shu. This one passes 5-1. The last complaint is the complaint received on March 13th. Is there is there a motion? Gordon?
I move we ask the superintendent to ask the complainant to delay by a month. And if not, we deal with it at our next meeting or whenever we need to, but to be timely.
Is there a second? Seconded by Judy Newman. Okay, are there any comments or questions? No. Okay. I'm gonna decide in the next 30 seconds, but I'm undecided myself. I'm just saying that out loud. Only because this one has a longer timeline. And I think we could work it out time-wise without asking for a postponement and still be within the 90 days. I know that asking for postponements is pretty stressful for the complainant. Everybody wants to find out what the answer is. So I think that with this one, which is from March 17th, I think that I personally think we could do this one within the right timeline. So that's just my position. Gordon?
So are you, it sounds like you're suggesting a friendly amendment that without reaching out to the complainant, we address this at our next meeting? Or at some meetings on a timely basis?
No, I'm suggesting that we make a decision how we're gonna handle it tonight.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we had a conversation about all of these, and I think we were leading towards the same action for all of them. So I would like to get started on this one personally, but that's just me. All those in favor of asking for a month-long postponement, raise your hand and say aye. Okay, we have 4 ayes. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay.
Nay.
So that passes 4-2 with ayes from Kirti Hasija Kaufman, Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, and Gordon Lafer, and nays from Myra Bassa and Michelle Shu. All right. With that, we move on to items for action at a future meeting. The first item for action at a future meeting is to consider revisions to board policy BHD, board member compensation and expense reimbursement, and we are here from Rob Hess.
Maya, can I bother you for a second? We still have quite a few of the folks here, and I'm wondering if we can move the Kelly Middle School YG immersion elementary school location discussion up. They want to get home and watch, or what that is it? Do something.
Unless there is objection, that is totally reasonable to me. Anybody refuse to let the people go home? Okay, in that case, without objection, we'll jump right to item number 3 under this agenda item, which is Kelly Middle School and Eugene Gakuen Japanese Immersion Elementary School location. To give a little context for those listening who haven't followed along, I also invite Michelle Shu and Dr. Dai to contribute any input or answer any questions on this topic. The North Subcommittee has been meeting now for several years. Initially, it was a district committee, and Gordon Lafer and Mary Walston were members who attended. We then shifted the committee to be a board subcommittee in order to expand the voices to include students and parents, make meetings accessible to the community, and commit to transparency around this process, which is then directly tied to accountability. Since this shift, first membership included Gordon Lafer and myself, and this year it has been myself and Michelle Shu. We've listened and gleaned a deep understanding of both Kelly and Eugene Gakuen's absolute needs, as well as their strongest desires, and really everything in between. Together as a committee, we've brainstormed possibilities. We've had conversations about the burden of labor this has put on staff. We've explored and honored the emotional toil this has taken on everyone. And we have accepted the fate that these two schools we've accepted that the fate of these two schools has been unfortunate and did not take the shape folks that made the decision that led to their co-location had hoped for. And now we are tasked with creating a plan that will set the stage for both of these programs to thrive. But really, it should be strongly emphasized that the decision we make is not exclusively to Kelly and YG, as both schools are pieces in comprehensive K-12 immersion programs. At this point, after taking inventory of needs and visions for the future of these two schools, it is becoming pretty clear that co-location is not likely our best bet, which doesn't come as a surprise, as many of you may recall former Superintendent George Russell's diligent work to decouple alternative schools and neighborhood schools, as co-location was directly attributed to inequities within buildings and made for difficult community relationships. So the question in front of us remains, what next? We can jump into the conversation, or I can offer you a few points to consider that I noted based on our meetings. I'm looking at you, Judy.
Well, I think I would like to set us a very rigorous timeline to have a decision by a certain date and what kind of information we might need. I would like to have a chance to look at the thought exchange as well that's out there. That sounds like maybe there's could be some even fresh ideas that came in from that. But I'd like to set up a rigorous timeline of what kind of financial information we need. A lot of questions have come up about money that was going to be spent on the e-web building and money that's going to cost to build the fields or demolish the building. So I just think we maybe need to make a list of what we need to know and also look at some of the ideas that have come through from the community. But I'd like to get a date certain or a plan to have a couple work sessions soon about this.
Okay, Superintendent Dye.
It's as important or equally as important as the timeline. I'd like for the board to provide me and in turn me with staff with some clarity about what our task is. Because if the task is to find a location, then we can do that. But my understanding from hearing from folks is that there's also a desire to have a articulated plan to ensure a robust K-12 program. And some of the things that are going to go into that conversation would have nothing to do with the location. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not looking for something so complex that it extends the timeline into forever, but as an example, there are Japanese programs in multiple high schools. And so it makes it possible for easy decisions to be made not to stay in YG K through 12. Is that something that we want to consider? Are there changes there that we want to make? Keeping it in the North region. That seems to be a topic about which the community wants a commitment and a decision that's durable. So I'd ask for you to take into consideration what you task us to do and what recommendations you task us to bring back to you.
Gordon.
I agree. We need to, we need a long-term answer, including the things that you just raised. And honestly, I don't have long-term thoughts, but I have a couple questions about the short term, which is, well, one is if YG moves to Willard, is that being thought of as a permanent solution, or is it a possibility that something will happen on the next bond? But just in the short term, I guess and maybe this is for the next meeting, I'd be interested in hearing about the cost and feasibility, if YG moves to Willard, even if it's temporary, the cost and feasibility of transportation services, at least for some transition period. And then also if we can guarantee maintenance of staffing levels. I'm just concerned when there's a transition like this that then kids start, you can have a decrease of enrollment and then staff decreases with enrollment, we end up in a downward spiral, and can we guarantee staffing levels for whatever the transition period is? Maybe that's not done tonight, but those are things that would be helpful, just if that's, to the extent that that is the thing that we're looking at. Thanks.
Alicia?
Thank you. So for me, I heard at last Wednesday's meeting, a lot of creative ideas about where YG could go in the North region and keeping them in the North region. So I need those, so late, investigated. Thank you. I need to know, it was, what about River Road? What about, we heard tonight, something new, what about part of North? What is the possibility of that and what is the cost? I also, Gordon, you asked about the bond. Well, you as a board decide what, as you know, not teaching you anything, I'm just clarifying. The board would decide what goes on the bond. So if, I'm very committed that we need to build out at the Kenny Loop site. Of course, I only have 2.5 months, so it's not gonna happen in my tenure, but we have to build that. Maybe you put YG on there for a build in some space we have at North. You put some, not portables, but prefab somewhere to build, so there's a separate spot. But then the intent, and obviously this board can't make a commitment for future boards, but then the board should be here for a while. The intent then may be to go out with a bond for a permanent location. But I need to know how much money we really have, and I need to know what is reality and what is fantasy for me, because I thought there were some very creative ideas, but I don't know if they would really work, for YG to be in the North region. We need to fully vet those ideas. Not with, I'm not asking you to get specs, and we know what things cost, but what's the reality of those? Does that make sense, or did I just, it's late?
Judy, unless somebody else who hasn't spoken wants to jump in.
I just want to reinforce though, how much money we have to spend is probably really critical, and what are the limitations on some of the funding, like the ESSERs being spent by 2024, for example. And then potential locations. This is the first I've heard, which other high schools have Japanese programs or just classes?
Not an immersion program, but Japanese classes have shown themselves.
Any middle schools?
Yeah, North, let's not
Yeah,
forget,
Kelly.
representing.
Kelly, YG.
Well, there's a pause. I'm gonna share at least some of the things that I have listed here to keep in mind for the board members who haven't necessarily attended or listened to every single meeting. And we've also received a lot of emails, and we also had that forum. And then there's other means of communication too, so this can be added too. But these are just some points that I think should drive our conversation alongside money and physical geographical space. It has been made very clear that the Japanese immersion program needs a plan that covers the entirety of the program, not just YG, but kindergarten through 12th grade. It has been clear that YG itself has been asking for its own building since as far back as anyone can remember. It has been made clear that the Japanese immersion program has long held a strong desire to have the support and infrastructure needed to grow and strengthen their program at all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high. It has been made clear that if YG were to be moved to Willard, there is a strong desire for the rest of the Japanese immersion program to follow. To be clear, however, that is not to be confused with a particular desire for this move. It is to say that if this is where the board heads with our decision, there is not a clear desire for YG to be at Willard and Japanese immersion at the middle and high to remain at Kelly and North Eugene High School. I want to emphasize that these are not unanimous things. These are identification of patterns based on lots and lots of conversation and input. It has been made clear that YG would prefer to stay in the North region. It has been made clear that Kelly Middle School was forced to make major cuts to their program in order to co-locate. It is clear that these programmatic losses have led to decreased access to the robust middle school experience our Kelly students deserve. And I think the others I'll leave off, they're pretty obvious. So I just want to make sure that those things are communicated really straightforwardly. We've heard from at least one staff member who asked us to really make sure that our decision allows both programs to be made whole again. So I think that kind of sums up a lot of what we need to use as a guiding principle. Does anybody have any, there's a lot of ideas that have been thrown out, some of them more viable than others. One piece of input is that we don't have to follow our ed specs. There might be some schools who didn't want to follow them that might get really frustrated that we decide to no longer require those to be followed. But such is the decision-making burden on us to deal with. But one of the ed specs that we were shared with is that the ideal lot size for an elementary school is 11 acres. I'm looking at you, Andy, is that right? Do I get that right? Is 11 acres. Again, that's ideal. It's not written in stone. It's just what we have driving our ed specs. I'm trying to think of any other information that would be worth throwing out there as we ponder some of the newer arrivals of ideas. Keep in mind that anywhere we build, like if we were to build, for example, on the road site, it would require us to also build more parking, which then takes up more of that space. And the playground on the River Road side of the building is not big enough to accommodate 2 schools. So then we'd have to also make space for a playground. So these are all things that are hard things to discuss, but I think until we discuss them, we're letting people have, it's hard to say no. And at the same time, that's how you work through brainstorming, right? You weed out the things that are viable and you keep them on the table, and then the ones that aren't, you move along. Alicia, and then Judy.
Judy, I heard it up first. You just didn't see it.
So I just ask also that we create a timeline and commit to it. So we might not be able to do that tonight, so I'm going to ask leadership to look at our schedule and then send it in the Friday memo and we'll present it at our next meeting. I just think I really want to have an aggressive timeline to get on this.
We did have in our packet that we would be moving into decision-making territory at our next meeting. Is that, you say you want something aggressive, I'm assuming that's too aggressive?
If we get all the if we have all the materials and have a chance to get together and ask questions, it wouldn't be, but it might be impossible given all the things we're talking about.
Right, so that's why this time and space now is where we come up with the questions that we have for materials. Because if we don't tell Andy what we want his staff to research for us, then we just get to the next meeting and we don't have the information. Are there things that we can at least get started, or do we want to commit to aggressive timeline? I do want to say that it is abundantly clear that the longer we wait, the more heightened the stress is for our students, our staff, our families. Somebody referenced a conversation about a hallway, and it has become very there's a lot of stress involved. So I think that there's a lot of work that's gone into this. The process has been lingering for years, and I think that we need to ask our questions so we can get our data and start making some decisions and plans so people can start having an idea of what their future looks like. And like I said, I call Andy like 4 times a day to ask for things. So I've been getting my data, and I want to make sure that you all have that same access. Michelle?
You had brought up the possibility of a site that's smaller than 11 acres, and you also mentioned parking, and we know that the city will make exceptions for sites that cannot accommodate parking lots to have street parking. Parking lots take up a lot of space.
Right, and that works when there is street parking. So if you visited River Road, there's not street parking there. Alicia?
So one of the things we heard tonight was that the concern that we might have, when we talked about the Old North, that people didn't get a chance to process, that would, Courtney brought that up as a concern. And I just feel like if we think we're gonna make a decision in 2 weeks, I just don't think people are gonna get a chance to digest what's possible, or even for us to know what's possible. I do worry as well that if we're planning to do something starting at the beginning of the school year next year, that we are pushing it. If we decide to put prefabs, we probably couldn't even get them ordered. That being said, I think any of these ideas that we ask to be vetted, that timelines be put on those, so that we can make clear choices. If we want this, it'll take a year. If we want this, whatever, realistic timelines, so we can make those decisions. And I just don't know, I was kind of, sorry, I'm just gonna ramble here for a sec, but at the meeting last Wednesday, it occurred to me that I know you all have been getting to go to meetings and hearing, but we haven't had that community meeting. We haven't had that opportunity for people to, we were tardy because that's what we were doing, is we were just doing that two-way conversation. I don't know if that makes sense, but I absolutely missed that. I liked our table talk, but I missed just the chance to have a two-way conversation with folks. So I don't know if there's a chance to put that in, but I think it helps. I don't know, you guys might just be more pissed off, but, yeah.
I think that's reasonable, and I also think it might be worth us considering separating the decision into 2 tracks. Before we invest time and energy into exploring all these different options, I think it might be wise for us to address the question of, is co-location still on the table? Because I think that is a separate question. That's just a suggestion. It doesn't have to be
the look from the audience, but no, when you mean, can I ask you a question, Maya? I'm sorry to interrupt. When you mean co-location, do you mean anything at all on Kelly's site or the co-location as it sits now?
I mean, both schools on that same site.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think that both school communities, when faced with the idea, what I personally have been hearing in that meeting space and in that in our emails, is that co-location, unless it's a intentionally built K-8, which Kelly is not, co-location has been incredibly difficult. And I want to remind us again that we went through this like 15, 20 years ago, and we closed a lot of alternative schools because we were prioritizing neighborhood schools. And I do not even want to hint at the idea of closing YG, so not at all my point. But my point is that I have come to really see our solution in finding another location for YG and ensuring that that location also accommodates the cluster of Japanese immersion, that YG is not isolated away from their middle and high school programs. But that's where I stand based on what I've experienced and heard and remember living through the closure of Hillside and Magnet Arts and Evergreen and on and on. We know. Superintendent Dye?
As I'm thinking out loud and amplified publicly in a meeting, which isn't always the brightest thing to do, if we identified untold money within our budget or had a generous benefactor or moved to Willard, nothing will happen either because of time required to design and plan and get permits or Willard not being available. I don't foresee a different location available for YG at the start of this next school year. And I think what we need to do as a start is to develop a comprehensive plan that involves community input, staff input, student input, so that we can not lackadaisically make a decision over some ill-defined period of time, but have the time to do the process well. I need to work with my communication staff and my facility staff so that we can gather information to present to people and have enough opportunities for conversation so it's not a one shot at being able to voice your opinion and your desires. I am looking at staff now. I'd like to be able to come back in 2 weeks with a roughed out plan for what we think could be done for all sections of a more comprehensive plan to make this decision, which would include getting you information about the money and prospective costs, nothing exact until we would know what would be designed. So it is a complex process that can be done, but I want you to know exactly what that is so that we can hold ourselves accountable to a defined plan. You can hold us accountable to a defined plan, and there's not a wondering as to when the next meeting is or when the next phase is. And that's a work order that the new board would be able to follow. Because it's potential that there'd be some people that could be on the board that have not been in any of this conversation at all, and I wouldn't want to have to start over and get people up to speed without that. So I suppose if I'm asking for anything, it would be to be able to come back with some thoughts on paper for you to reflect on as to what the process might be.
Judy?
I appreciate that. Does the process include what we have to, the part of the finances that we have and more specifics, or just a process?
We can provide you with some information. The money that we have now might not necessarily help us if we're looking at construction project that would be started in 2 years and completed in 4.
Except I think we have a now project and we have a now problem though too. So I think it's important to know.
Sure.
I like that idea. I like that.
Does anybody else have thoughts about that suggestion? Judy?
I just have a question, do we have on our calendar a work session already scheduled? Or could that be a longer meeting just to go over what is brought in a work session?
I'm just looking at the calendar, but we don't have anything scheduled on that next meeting, and we also don't have anything scheduled on the Wednesday in between. We do have 2 other complaints that we need to process them. So we might need to squeeze in another meeting, maybe next week, a short work session. And then give Superintendent Dye and his team 2 weeks and do a work session before the next meeting. And then that meeting in between could be a quick work session to process those 2 complaints. I don't want to welcome new board members with the inheritance of a pile of complaints to process. It'd be really nice if we took care of those, at least that have come in now. Well, if there's no objections, I don't know if that's enough of a timeline. Judy, does that make you feel comfortable for a first step, or do you want to also lay down an expectation of when we would be able to inform these communities of what their future is going to look like? I know they've been in limbo for so long that I want to encourage us to give ourselves a deadline if possible for that final decision, and not just the reception of information from Dr. Diane.
I'm going to plan, but I think at that meeting, our goal is to set the rest of the timeline. So where we can make a decision. So in 2 weeks, when the superintendent brings a plan and some of this information, we could establish the timeline then.
Okay, I would love it if we might be able to even aim for a date now so people can have, I don't know. It feels like we'll create a timeline then it just leaves people really not knowing when they're going to be able to expect to know. I feel like people have been waiting for a really, really long time and going to a lot of meetings and having a lot of meetings internally, and
Do you have a suggestion?
Do you have a suggestion? Timeline?
I'm hearing us also saying we want to do one of those roundtable forums. So I think that we need to, Dr. Dye, would you rather do that after you put this material together or before?
I have to give that some thought.
Okay.
I don't wanna have a table discussion without anything to present, but, I need some time to work with staff to see what we could pull together, given all of the other things we've got going. I don't wanna waste anybody's time.
Okay. And so maybe I'll just throw out that I would personally like us to have this decision made no later than the first meeting in June. And if possible, if we could do it earlier, I would much prefer to do it as soon as we're all comfortable that we've given the community a chance to give input, gotten all of our answers that we want. But I don't want to push it out. I don't want to push it out to our second meeting in June. And I definitely don't want to start all over with we have the possibility of 4 new board members. if we push it out, then people leave for the summer not knowing what their future holds. And that doesn't feel fair. And
Yeah, again, I wanna be really clear when you say, I wanna have this decision by the 1st of June, what decision? And I think that complexity and the scope of the decision is going to impact the timeline. We can come to a decision by June, but it might justifiably take more time than that if we're talking about what are the pros and cons of, in a moderate to long term, for example, a build at Admiral, or a build on River Road, or a build somewhere else. It's gonna take some time to get cost information, design information. I just don't wanna overpromise and under-deliver. If it's a conversation that goes beyond just the physical location, and we're talking about programming changes, there'll be things that I think might require multi-year stage in other schools, for example. If you're gonna phase out language programs somewhere, you don't wanna give up on commitments that one has made abruptly. So I'm not saying anything other than I believe it's incumbent upon me, working with my staff, to maintain this as a priority, and for the board to hold us accountable as a staff to continue to provide you with information so that you can make a decision. But I'm just not certain that we can yet determine the deadline for a decision in such short order until we properly frame what it is that we're trying to solve in terms of the problem, the scope of the problem. I believe that much clarity can come within 2 weeks when we bring you back some information. Much.
right, I agree. And that's why I'm hoping that 4 weeks after that, we would have had time to gather any more information that we might need and at least come to a decision that gives folks an idea of what, I mean, if no matter what we do, there's going to be a medium, I mean, a short-term, medium, and long-term component to the process. But we can come up with a decision regarding the vision of where and how the where will happen for these two programs. That's my hope anyway. I think they've been waiting. They were told it was a short-term co-location, and now it's been 5-6 years of being in limbo. And then if they're going to have short-term, midterm, and long, I think that the short-term is not going to be the solution. So in order to survive the short-term without losing confidence, I think the honorable thing to do is to commit to a vision and begin the work that it takes to have that vision unfold. And maybe I'm being lofty, but it's really hard to live in limbo. Alicia?
I think we can shoot for that and see how it goes. I think we're ready to go.
So let's keep it as a goal versus a hard deadline. If that's something everyone agrees to. And we'll know more next meeting after 2 weeks when we receive more information from staff. All right. In that case, are there any more comments or questions? No? Okay, then we move back up to considering revisions to board policy BHD, which is board member compensation. I bet there's a couple of people who might leave after that, so I'll give it 2 seconds. All right. Thank you, Rob, for leading us through this possible revision to policy BHD.
So you have policy BHD in front of you. This is one that you asked us to bring back a proposed revision to this. This is for action at a future meeting. This was the language, pretty simple, that we got from OSBA, the recommendation. And basically the important part of this policy is that when the board members go on conferences or trips or to different events, that the board approves that. So that would be things that would need to be approved by the board, voted on by the board, whether that's OSBA or convention or something of that nature. I know that necessarily hasn't been past practice, but that is our policy as written, if and recommended.
Are there questions or comments for Rob? So Rob, the only change from what we currently have is for the board to vote ahead of time on approving.
Yeah, actually, the being approved by the board was in the previous policy. It's just, it didn't always happen.
Okay.
So we didn't have this board adopting the same policy with this.
Well, I think there's some more, they've added a little more language to it in terms of when paid admission. If you look, there's the black line, red line copy there.
Yeah.
And you can see they've added a paragraph to it to make it a little more clear, but there wasn't a big revision on this policy. There was a district business phrase they put there, but you know, if you have ideas to make it more robust, we could. But this is what came back when we took this to OSBA.
Dr. Dye.
I think the active approval by the board is important, and we also don't really have a handy AR that defines the manner in which and the parameters around which board members will be compensated. There's language in our financial policies that stipulate how staff can be reimbursed for things like airfare or mileage up to a certain amount, and that same language does not currently exist for members of the board, and there's actually some language that suggests it could be done differently, and I believe that leads to ambiguity, and would want to provide more clarity for staff moving forward into the future about how those decisions are made. I think that's just important to note.
And we'll be able to do that with this policy. Sorry, Maya.
No, it's okay. I just couldn't hear you. Could you say that again?
Sorry. Just not in person enough, I obviously have some bad manners. I just asked, and this policy will be able to address the concerns Dr. Dye presented, and he said yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the only thing, and I don't know if this is just wading into the weeds, but I was surprised that it's not in policy already, but, and we, I think, talked about it at leadership, is including a component that when board members receive compensation for going to conferences or other similar events that have a admission fee, that there is a hope and expectation that there would be some sort of reporting back so that the whole board could benefit and learn from that experience. And I don't know if that's just me being a geek and wanting to learn, or if that's like a normal thing. It's just something that I noticed wasn't in this. And when I received funding from, for example, the board members of Color Caucus, they required that I gave a report on what I learned at the conference that they paid for me to go to. So I don't know if that's something that we want to consider adding to ours. That's the only thing that I remember having a conversation about with this. Judy?
I think that's a really good goal, but sometimes logistically it's hard. Maybe it's something we could say in our working agreements that we would strive to do that. But to make it a policy, then you have to put it on an agenda. I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea, just sometimes it doesn't work out.
Sure. Just to clarify, when I did it for the members of Color Caucus, it was a written report and I just submitted it, and then you could see other people's. It wasn't like I used up time at a meeting or something to present. It was, the presentation was written. I just know that last year when we were at the OSBA conference in the summer and in the fall, when there were a number of us, it was great to process what we had learned in our different sessions, but those people who didn't attend couldn't have come out of that experience with that, with any insight that we had learned. So just a thought, but. All right, if there's nothing else about this, thank you, Rob. I believe you're up again to consider revision for policy IGDJ, interscholastic sports.
Yes, this is a required policy based on legislation that was passed, especially pertaining to the all students belong legislation. And as you can see in the red version there, there's two big areas that focus on equity priorities and policies that the state has outlined, and also a transparent complaint process when there are events that happen at interscholastic activities. So those are outlined there, and this again is revisions suggested by OSBA to make this policy in place. We did have some language in there about homeschooled students, that they must reside and participate in the school where they live, the boundary where they live, so that not just any school. So that's an important piece there that we were outlined.
I'm just curious if you know if if the interscholastic organizations that we work with now meet these criteria that are in the red.
Yeah, that is what's required. I mean, this is this is based on the new law.
No, I understand, but so as far as you know, everybody who we're working with is in fact meeting these requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions or comments or concerns or any such thing? Thanks again, Rob, for sticking it out till the end. In that case, the last item on the agenda is suggestions by the board for considerations of items at a future board meeting. Are there items the board would like to suggest to add to future board meetings?
It was brought up by the teacher today, and I know we've got a couple of comments about it in our email, but I would just like some more information on how we are addressing some of the drops and FTE around the TOSAs and some of the plans that we have on the ELA and the social studies and adoptions going forward, and like what the plan is for the development and the implementation of those measures moving forward for the next couple of years, considering that big drop in staffing.
Are there 2 hand raises? Okay, Judy has her hand raised and Gordon. Okay, so we can add that to our conversation, that leadership for adding to the next or a future agenda, next one perhaps. I'm just writing this down so I don't forget. Any other items? Okay, well then, thank you, everyone. The next board meeting is scheduled for May 3rd, 2023, and this meeting is adjourned at 10.
Wait, you don't adjourn, please send us to recess, because we're going into executive session. Because I want to stay till tomorrow, is my hope.
So close.
Recessed, and we will return to this meeting. Down. I will see you all. Do we go use our old link to go
Yeah, I was
back?
gonna ask, do we jump on the old?
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Is that a yes,
Well,
Maya?
I got a thumbs up from Andy. Yeah. So
Okay.
you
I'll see you on
all,
the other end.
can we plan on going straight over there? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.